Come on, ride the train and ride it. Whoop, whoop. Come on, ride the train and ride it. Whoop, whoop. Come on. It's the choo-choo. Come on. It's the choo-choo train. Come on, ride the train and ride it. Whoop, whoop. Come on, ride the train and ride it. Whoop, whoop. Come on. It's the choo-choo. Come on. It's the choo-choo train.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. I hope you are gearing up for Thanksgiving. Really quick note, I do want to add, I will be live Thanksgiving evening, but I will not be live on Friday or Sunday because I will be heading to New York this weekend. But if you have nothing going on Thursday evening, I will be here. So I hope to see your faces if you are free. But lots of things are happening, you guys. I actually do have 6 stories that I'm covering tonight. Can't fit everything in those little squares, but I have a lot to cover. And we are going to do call in tonight as well. But I want to go ahead and start out by giving shout outs to people in the chat. What's going on? Miguel says peace. Shout out to CBC Voters says happy Tuesday, Sabby Sabs. Happy Tuesday to you too. Shout out to Mr. Allen. He will not be getting Black support, period. Hold on, Mr. Allen. Calm down. Hold on. We're going to get there. Shout out to Golden Monarch. Mr. Allen, which Black voters exactly? I think Sabby will break this down and we'll all realize it's still just a minority. We'll get into all of that. Shout out to Randy. Good evening, Sabby comrades. Has turned into a downpour in central New York. Yikes. Hope it won't be raining in New York when I go this weekend. Shout out to Reza. Israel and assassination of Kennedy brothers. Interesting. Greetings, Hannah G says, at work, but I'll be listening. Shout out to Taffy says, shooby-dooby-doo. Hope Sabby's in a good moody mood. I am. It's been a busy day, but I'm in a good mood. Shout out to Lorez says, sup, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. After a full weekend of football, back to reality with Sab. Uh-oh. Miss Jill on CNN. It was bad, huh? No, surprisingly not. You're going to wait for it. Cardi B dropped some truth. Glad she's off Biden. Smash the like, y'all. Shout out to David who says hello. Greetings, Volvo says, hey, cookie. Shout out to Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says 2-minute whistle. Greetings, Gamer says hello. Shout out to Robert. At first, I read it as Biden does cardio and drops dead. Oh, well. Does not say that. Greetings, Deborah says good evening. Shout out to Aspen Fallen. Greetings, Dr. Nick says, hi, everybody. What's going on? Vegan Goddess says hello to Gamer and everyone else. What's going on, Deborah? I always look forward to what Sabby has to say. Thank you. That's really sweet. Shout out to Leroy, who's a Sabby member, says choo choo. Yeah, so earlier today, I was at the store and I heard, come on, ride the train. You guys remember that song, Come on, ride the train and ride it. Whoop, whoop. I heard the song playing in the store and I was like, whoa, what about a flashback, buddy? Because I remember when that song was like really popular. You heard it everywhere, but I haven't heard that song in years. So hearing that song again, it just kind of took me back to some fun memories there. Shout out to Mark says, Sabby, ACC to Sagar. I shouldn't care about the Palestinians. I swear when I used to watch Rising, Sagar once said he got interested in politics when he opposed the Iraq war in high school. That's interesting. I don't remember seeing him say that, but that is interesting. It makes you wonder what has changed. Shout out to Gus says hello to Gamer for Lice. Let's give Gamer for Life. Sorry, not lice. Gamer is not for lice. Let's give it up for Jasmine Harrell for becoming a Sabby member. Let's give Jasmine a big whoop whoop. Shout out to Joe says go to any video. They have 66,000 thumbs up. Okay. Shout out to those people. Shout out to Mastermind says, hello, everybody's. Oh, man. You guys are funny tonight. Shout out to Jen says, doobie doobie doo. Greetings, Kimmy says, hi, Miss Sabby. Love all you Sabsters. What's going on to Raphael says, salute. Shout out to Joseph Bet says, what up? What up, Joe? Greetings, Eric says RFK is gaining black votes. Well, if you needed evidence of the red-blue game no longer having legitimacy, here it is. We'll get into all of that. Shout out to Will says Sab is the best. Thank you so much, Will. Greetings, Joey Peltier, who's also a Sabby member, says Land Back Day. Shout out to Nancy says hello to everyone. And thank you for the super chat, Raphael. Sabrina, I am a fan. Outstanding job, sister. Thank you so much, Raphael. I appreciate that. And shout out to Randy says love and peace. Greetings. Prime says greetings from Mexico. All right. All right. I was going to sing Feliz Navidad at the intro when you guys are waiting for the intro vid to start. I was going to sing that. And then because I had that song in my head too. And I was like, no, we haven't even made it through Thanksgiving yet. So I probably should not start singing Christmas songs. But wait for it, guys, because Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas is just around the corner. Just around the corner. All right, guys, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys for doing the damn thing around here. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. There's also Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you guys. Shout outs. All right. Now let's go ahead and get into that beautiful thumbnail. I say it's beautiful. I know it's not that fancy, but I don't have graphic design skills. I do the best I can. I do the best I can. What are we talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Tonight, we are discussing RFK Jr. gains black voters. Dun, dun, dun. You'll notice there's a picture of Joe Biden there next to him, who is actually losing black voters. What is happening there? I'm going to give you a breakdown about that and what I think is going on. We're also going to discuss Nina Turner is smeared by Abby Phillips from CNN. That's Abby Phillips right next to her. She thought she tried to be slick when she slid in the comment that she did. We're going to talk about that tonight and why some leftists easily get smeared when they criticize the Democratic Party. We're also going to discuss, if you have not seen this, Jill Stein actually was interviewed on CNN. We're going to get into that. And this just proves my point that, once again, for people who said that these independent and third party candidates would not get mainstream media attention, that is not the case this time around. We're also going to discuss Cardi B drops Biden, and she's very vocal about it. Very vocal about it. We're going to get into that and the significance of that statement coming from her. And I also have 2 other stories. We are going to discuss the recent update in the UAW strike. They have reached a deal. And last but not least, if you have not heard, this actually just came my way about an hour ago. it appears Susan Sarandon is facing some serious issue because of her support for the Palestinian people. So we're going to make sure we cover that tonight as well. But let's get started, guys. So I want to start with this story about the UAW strike. You guys know that these employees did decide to go on strike. They decided to do a strategic strike, which I was not familiar with at the time. And I was actually not positive about it. I actually thought it wasn't a good idea, but I admitted that I was wrong. And it turns out it has worked out for them doing it that way. And I'm woman enough to admit when I'm wrong and come back and correct myself here. So I do want to let you know that they actually have reached a deal. And I'm also going to explain to you how this particular strike actually may impact Tesla, believe it or not. Let's go ahead and get into this article here. UAW members ratify big three deals that ended the 2023 auto strike. 64% of auto workers vote to approve contracts. So not 100%, but the majority. So let's go ahead and get into this article here. Unionized auto workers across the U.S. have voted to approve the tentative contracts with Detroit's big three automakers that ended in a week-long strike amid an unusual negotiation season. The United Auto Workers Union announced on Monday that the majority of its members at Ford Motor Company, Stellantis, and General Motors have voted to ratify 4.5-year contract agreements that both sides declare historic. The deals reached at the end of October are similar among each of the big three, though each contract contains a few different components. The contracts include more than 20% wage increases, cost of living adjustments, retiree bonuses, shortening the time to reach top wages, and more benefits. Can you imagine receiving a 20% wage increase right now? What would that do for you? If you received a 20% wage increase right now, what could you do with that money? You could probably pay off some bills, probably get ahead on some bills, right? If you had things like that you're kind of waiting to do, but you didn't have the money to do, let's say you had some home repairs that you needed to do, you could probably do that now. I don't know anyone that has received a 20% wage increase. So that's actually pretty huge. Last week, it seemed UAW workers at GM could potentially vote down their tentative agreement, despite the majority of members at Ford and Stellantis voting in favor of their deals. However, GM workers narrowly voted in favor of the agreement, according to the final tallies reported last week. Final votes were cast at the remaining Ford and Stellantis local offices in the days to follow, and members ultimately approved all three deals. So last week, I did see that it looked like it was not going to pass. And I was a little nervous for them because, again, like they have been on strike all of this time, so they're not getting paid. So I was nervous when I saw that it looked like it wasn't going to pass, but it did. It goes on to say UAW officials said on Monday that across all three car makers, 64% of members voted in favor of ratifying the deals, officially ending a 6-week strike amid a tense and unusual negotiation season. The strikes, which involved over 40,000 of UAW's 146,000 auto workers, were suspended after the tentative agreements were reached, but before they were ratified. We are pleased our team members have ratified the new agreement that rewards our employees, protects the future of business, and allows us to continue to provide good jobs in communities across the U.S. That is coming from General Motors CEO Mary Barra. Now, the new union contracts will take effect for all UAW auto workers and will expire in mid-2028. But UAW President Shawn Fain isn't stopping there. The new aggressive and outspoken union leader is setting his sights on other non-unionized car makers and at other industries in which the UAW members work. Throughout the week-long auto strike, Fain maintained that the effort was meant to benefit both the auto workers and other middle-class workers outside of the industry. After finding success in his hands-on, boisterous, and marketed approach to bargaining and striking, Fain has expressed interest in adding workers at Toyota, the world's top-selling automaker, and workers in other industries to the union and its self-declared fight against the billionaire class. So do you see what's happening here? Now, this is starting to spread to other auto companies. Now, Toyota. And there's another one that I'm going to show you too that I'm going to get into. It goes on to say the members have spoken after years of cutbacks and months of stand-up campaign and weeks on the picket line. We have turned the tide for the American auto worker. The stand-up strike was just the beginning. The UAW is back to setting the standard. Now we take our strike muscle and our fighting spirit to the rest of the industries we represent, and to the millions of non-union workers ready to stand up and fight a better way of life. So this turned out to be a win for them. So I was incorrect about the strategic strikes. I just thought it would be more beneficial if all of the auto workers from all of those plants walked out at the same time. But it appears the strategy that they chose did work. I want to get into this clip here to show you what happened at GM.
Strikes that crippled the US auto industry were ended by big deals on pay hikes, but those agreements needed ratification by union members. Now workers at General Motors have become the first to give their approval. They have voted to back the deal negotiated by the United Auto Workers Union. That will...
By the way, I genuinely, seriously apologize that the commentator here is not more enthusiastic. This was one of the only clips I could find that I knew didn't have copyright. But it's just funny. Like, he doesn't sound like enthusiastic or happy for the workers at all. He sounds like he just woke up. So I apologize for the monotone voice.
The top wages rise by 33% when cost of living adjustments are included. Attention now turns to the other members of the Detroit Three. Similar deals at Ford and Chrysler parent Stellantis await approval. Industry watchers say the signs are that they will comfortably pass. Other automakers are racing to make their own agreements as they strive to hold on to workers. UAW chief Sean Fain has said the union will target non-unionized firms that don't lift pay.
Terrified auto executives across the country are rushing to give their own employees raises in the hopes of fending off the UAW.
Subaru is the latest to say it plans pay increases.
So do you hear this now? Now other auto companies are starting to give their employees an increase in pay because of what happened with the UAW strike. So see how a strike with the UAW is actually affecting other companies. Other auto dealers are like, wait a minute now, we need to go ahead and give our employees a raise so this doesn't happen to us. So this is how things like strikes can actually be effective.
Japanese firm said Thursday that workers at its plant in Indiana will get hikes in line with industry levels. It didn't give a precise number. That follows similar moves at other firms using non-unionized labor, including Toyota, Honda, and Hyundai.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that gentleman is not more enthusiastic, but there's more. It's not just Toyota, Subaru, and Hyundai. They are also actually looking at making some type of a deal with Tesla. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Let's get into this article here from Reuters as well. It says the UAW clinches record Detroit deals, turns to organizing Tesla. Foreign automakers. Now, Tesla, this is Elon Musk's company. So this is really interesting. All right. The votes lock in UAW tentative agreements with the automakers through April 2028, which include a 25% increase in base wages and will cumulatively raised the top wage by 33%, compounded with estimated cost of living adjustments over $42 an hour. It has also cut the number of years needed to get to the top pay from 8 years to 3 years, will boost the pay of temporary workers by 150% and make them permanent employees. And it includes significant retirement improvements. This is a big one for the temp employees, because a lot of times if you're in a temp position, you actually do not have that option of doing temp to perm, right? Like more companies are more willing to hire just a temp worker instead of a temp to perm worker, because once they become perm, you have to give them benefits. These are companies like trying to be cheap, of course. So this is a big improvement in reference to the temp workers. It goes on to say, I already read that part. Let's get to this piece here. UA President Shawn Fain was in Washington last week to hold meetings to discuss the union's organizing strategy and is expected to outline more details in the weeks to come. Now we take our strike muscle and our fighting spirit to the rest of the industries we represent and to millions of non-union workers ready to stand up and fight for a better way of life. President Joe Biden, who has backed the UAW efforts to unionize other car makers, hailed union ratification on Monday. The UAW is fighting hard to ensure that all auto jobs are good, middle-class jobs, and I stand with them in this fight. That's really interesting considering the fact that Joe Biden wasn't willing to stand with the railroad workers. So I'm curious to hear how the railroad workers feel right now about how he responded towards them versus how he's responding towards the auto workers. Fain told Reuters last week that the UAW was getting expressions of interest in organizing from many Tesla workers. Workers at Tesla, Toyota, Honda, and others are not the enemy. They're the UAW members of the future. Votes in favor of the agreement from workers at some parts and component operations who stand to get substantial raises as they move to higher pay classifications outweighed votes against the contract from some veteran workers. So this is the piece that I wanted you to see. The fact that it seems like those who opposed the deal were the veteran workers. Now, some of you may wonder, why would any of them oppose the deal? If you're a veteran worker, you're already grandfathered in. You already got the most of your benefits for the most part. I wouldn't be surprised if it includes some kind of a pension. So if you're one of those veteran workers, you may get a pension. You may already have that retirement bonus. So to you, this doesn't really matter. And this is a problem that I've seen before in reference to worker solidarity. Whether you already got your benefits and you are a veteran worker, whether you are already grandfathered in, you should still support and back the current workers, the workers that came in after you that are not eligible for those same benefits that you were once eligible for. And I want to give an example that I know of personally. MIT. When I started working at MIT, you know, a lot of people get excited to work there because they're like, you get this pension and yada, yada. So eventually that changed. So there were people that were employed at MIT, so they qualified for the pension. Those people were already grandfathered in. Some of the hourly workers at MIT wanted to get together and fight for that same right for the other workers, the new employees. They wanted to be able to still get the pension as well. What was really interesting is, again, some of the veteran employees who already got theirs weren't interested in trying to help them in that fight. Now, that's not fair. You have to have worker solidarity. And that was something that I did notice. It's like, oh, I get it, because you already got yours. You don't want to help other people who came after you get theirs. Another thing that the veteran workers got at MIT that newer workers didn't receive is they actually used to receive a cost of living raise. Not just the standard 2% increase, but also a cost of living raise. That was something that, again, MIT decided to do away with. So it's just funny to me when I would see some people, some of the veteran workers, these are people like in their like 60s, 70s, et cetera, complain that the younger people don't want to work hard and they don't really want to fight for things like they did. But then at the same time, when the younger people that are coming into these companies and they're trying to fight for some of the same benefits that they were actually able to receive, that the new employees coming in have been basically rejected from, Is that not considered trying to fight and work hard? So that's the thing. And a lot of times people leave these things out that like, look, like the benefits that you received when you started working here are not the same benefits that we're receiving when we started working here. So you got to have that worker solidarity. I can't believe they would even sit up there and try to stand against that. Automakers looking to trim costs as they make the shift to electric vehicles face higher hourly labor costs. Ford has estimated the new contract will add $850 to $900 in labor costs per vehicle. Ford CEO Jim Farley said the company, said the company is on track to reach full production schedules for assembly plants impacted during the strike. The reality is that this labor agreement added significant cost, and we are going to have to work very hard on productivity and efficiency to become more competitive. So that's the UAW strike update there. So it does seem like they did get what they were asking for. Again, I don't know about you guys, but I never got a 20% wage increase. Even over, you talking about over like 4 years, 8 years. I mean, even over 10 years, because the most I think I got when I was at MIT was like the 2%. We'll give you a standard 2% increase, right? So that's huge. That's huge. In the end, it was worth it for them. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Come out to Palestine protest in Long Island Sunday, Sabby. I don't know if I could be able to do that. I already got things booked up, but we will see. Thank you for the super chat, Psyop Shorty, doobie doo. Thank you, Allie. Sally, my girlfriend loves your show. She's completely sees everything now. Free Palestine. Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Eric Gray, for the super chat. All of us teachers recently voted for a pay increase and despise this. We still have more teachers quitting. And now we have 275 open instructional positions in just one county alone. Yeah. And I bet the school board is in a rush to fill those positions, right? Thank you for the super chat, Vegan Goddess. I got a 20% raise in 1985. Holy smokes, Vegan Goddess. Where did you work? Holy smokes. Thank you for the super chat, Todd. Note, expiration on May Day 2028. Fain is planning bigger labor-wide moves later with other industries. First time hopeful for labor in a long time. There you go. See, I was wrong about Fain. He was looking at the bigger picture, and he actually did have a longer plan in mind. And I think that's really awesome. And shout out to Maria Romero for becoming a Sabby member. Let's give Maria a big whoop, whoop. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Eric said it's a Back to the Future race. There you go. Oh, man. All right, ladies and gentlemen. We are getting into this story about Nina Turner. I don't know if you have seen, but she was actually on CNN having a discussion with Abby Phillips, who you guys know I've been critical of Abby Phillips, but also a former Hillary Clinton advisor about Joe Biden and his inaction in reference to this situation with Israel and Gaza. Guys, you have to see this for yourself. They actually did try to pull the okey doke. They tried to smear Nina Turner like they would do anybody else on the left that's going to criticize the Democratic Party. And though I have criticisms for Nina Turner, I think she should just give it up with the Democrats. There's some truth to what she says here, and it just kills me. It's really interesting that they actually tried to do this smear. Check this out. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip.
A provocative political question tonight. Do Democrats have an Israel problem? The divide inside the party is growing over President Biden's actions as the Israel-Hamas war intensifies. And here to discuss now is former Hillary Clinton spokesperson Philippe Reines and also CNN political commentator and former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner. Nina.
You see, Former Hillary Clinton advisor. Okay, guys? So just keep that in mind when you hear his talking points.
Starting with you, parts of the left, no question, they are furious with President Biden. But are they really going to withhold their support next November over how he's handled this war?
Yes. I was already withholding my support from Joe Biden, anyone in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So regardless if this war happened or not, it is what it is. But that question that she asked, are they really going to do that? Oh, honey, Abby, you don't know voters the way that a lot of us do. The majority of Americans don't vote in the first place. So it'll be nothing more. The turnout continues to decrease over time. We still have not gotten back to that epic turnout in reference to voters that Barack Obama had in 2008. Just FYI.
It's a very real reality, Abby. I mean, we just saw the polling that was done in the previous segment that shows very clearly that President Biden right now is in trouble. 66% of Americans want a ceasefire in the Middle East, and I believe what is happening in the Middle East is animating more of the fury that voters are feeling. Democratic voters, especially younger voters, may just not come to the polls. And when you're thinking about a race within the margins, people not showing up to the polls will really have an impact on President Biden going into the 2024 election cycle.
Philippe, you wrote an op-ed this week about the fear in Jewish communities, saying that the uproar since October 7th has upended the feeling that Jewish Americans can tell friend from foe. This is actually playing out within the Democratic Party, it seems. Is this something that can be resolved before this next election, given what Nina just laid out?
Well, I don't know about resolve, but I do think it can be ameliorated between now and just over a little under a year from now. I think there are a couple of things at play here. First, I would like to think that in a broad sense that President Biden is doing what he believes is right and that will count for something to the voters. Let's
go ahead and interrupt and disrupt that there. Again, this is a former Hillary Clinton advisor. Okay, so he knows how the game is played. He knows it's not about Joe Biden doing what he thinks is correct. He knows it's about Joe Biden doing what the donors want him to do. A couple of nights ago, I showed you the list of all the candidates and the politicians in Congress that have taken money from pro-Israel groups. Remember, Bernie Sanders was also on that list. Don't know when he took the money, but he did at some point in time. But Joe Biden took the most, millions and millions of dollars. So, of course, again, a former Hillary Clinton advisor is not going to tell you that piece. He's just going to tell you that Joe Biden's doing what he thinks is correct.
So they voted for in 2020, and that's who they'll vote for in 2024. Second, I think, a lot of people, and not to say that it's all young people, because there are people of all stripes and colors and ages who have concerns about what's going on, as do I, as does anyone who's watching what's happening. But a lot of them are young and need to learn more about what's happening. A perfect example is when they're chanting from the river to the sea. I'd like to think that most of them don't know what they're saying. And when they have...
Here we go. Oh, God. Those college kids at Columbia, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, at these elite academic institutions have no idea what they're actually saying. Now we're going to say that the young kids are just dumb. They're just dumb. Let me ask you guys a question. For all the people that protested against the Iraq war, were they just ignorant or were they correct? Because, see, at the time, that was not a favorable thing to do. But in the end, they were actually correct. For all the people who protested against the Vietnam War, were they ignorant or were they correct? I would say that they were correct. But again, former Hillary Clinton advisor, Hillary Clinton also had received a lot of money from pro-Israel groups. It's on open secrets. You can look it up yourself. So you got to understand that when you get the talking points coming from this guy.
Have learned, they have stopped. But my point is that there's going to be time for people to understand and learn about what's happened the same way that people in colleges now weren't alive for 9/11, which is an experience that we all had that shapes our views. Third, to get down to the brass tacks of it, as Nina alluded to, you have a couple of options. One is that they don't vote. That's actually not great. Two, that they vote for one of the third-party candidates, particularly Jill Stein, who was absent in the 2020 campaign, but very much had a negative impact on the 2016 campaign, or that they vote for the Republican, who is likely Donald Trump. And I don't think three is going to happen. And I'd like to think at the end of the day, people will look at this election like every other election. It's between two people. And under no circumstances should any Democrat or anyone who loves America look at those two people and say that Donald Trump is the better of the two.
Let me pause here for a second. So you know what he's doing, right? He's trying to tell you that it's really only between two people. I'm going to show you some polls tonight that shows that is definitely not the case. It is no longer between two people. You will see that in the numbers. But again, he's doing what he's paid to do. This is why CNN will bring someone like him on, because they know that he is there to clap for the Democrat establishment. They know that he is there to continue to push the status quo, to tell you to vote for the Democratic Party. Now, he brings up the issue of Jill Stein. He talks about how she had a negative impact in 2016. A negative impact for who? For who? You know, we have third parties in this country so that people can have a choice outside of the duopoly. Simple as that. Those parties do exist. Those parties do run candidates. And so to me, it just seems like, again, they want you to pretend like those other parties and people who are running independents, they want you to pretend like they don't exist and just focus on the two establishment chills that they want you to focus on. I don't know if that's going to work this time. When we get to the polls, I'll show you and you'll see what I mean.
Nina?
See, this is the thing. This is not 2020. It's going to be 2024, and a lot has changed since then. And while I don't disagree that people need to be more educated about the history of the Middle East, it is patently clear that the American people, by 66%, overwhelmingly, there are polls out there that no less than 70% of Democrats are saying that there needs to be a ceasefire. To chalk this up as that people don't understand, people understand that genocide is happening over there. They understand that President Donald J. Trump, there's a difference between rhetoric and Trump's rhetoric and Biden's reality. And the reality is, Donald J. Trump is not the president of the United States right now.
That part right there. So this is something I do agree with Nina on. This is something I'll continue to say over and over again. You know, we have to hold the politician accountable that is president right now, which is Joe Biden. And these things are happening under Joe Biden's administration. We can't continue to just blame everything on Donald Trump when he is no longer in the White House. So again, these are the things that are happening under Joe Biden's administration. Notice how he interrupted her and said that's not true when she started to talk about the genocide that's happening. That's not true. Again, former Hillary Clinton advisor, former advisor to a warmonger. He is there to push the button and tell people, wait a minute, that's not actually happening over there.
Donald J. Trump didn't take us into two wars. We got a war going on in the Middle East. We got war going on in the Ukraine. And so what that dog doesn't hunt in 2024, and the electorate, especially Democrats, are saying to the brunch bunch in the bubble that we want to see something different happening. And when you have countless lives being taken, innocent lives being taken, people are standing up and taking notice of that. The LA Times is saying no more. You have 34 Congress people saying no more. You have the president of the NAACP, President Johnson, saying no more, and a whole host of religious leaders from all religions saying that we should have a ceasefire.
I have to say, I'm
going to have it.
Notice how Abby is starting to interrupt her, but notice that Abby didn't interrupt Philippe. So you see how this, wait till you hear what Abby says.
Impact on 2024.
I have to say, I am surprised to hear you make that argument that I hear actually a lot from Republicans, which is that Trump didn't get the United States into wars, and there are wars now. I mean, I don't know, Philippe, if you think that that's actually something that will...
it's a fact.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just wondering if that's something that you think, Philippe, will actually end up hurting President Biden.
There it is. There it is right there. The old, that's a right-wing talking point tactic. This is what they do. They didn't just do this to someone like Nina Turner. Remember, during Bernie Sanders campaigns, they did this to Breonna Joy Gray. They continue to do this to Breonna Joy Gray. They do this to anybody that speaks out against the Democratic Party that is a part of the left. So basically what they think is that if you are not on the right, you're not supposed to criticize the Democratic Party. You're just supposed to go along with the flow, which is what a lot of the Democrat politicians in DC do, to be honest with you. But I disagree with that, because the thing is this: Joe Biden's really messed up. He's really messed up. And I think you would be a fool to sit back and pretend like these things are not happening, and pretend like the polls aren't there, and pretend like the protests aren't happening outside your door. You would be a fool to pretend that the people are not angry, that the people are not in favor of what Joe Biden is doing. So what does Abby Martin do? The moment that Abby Phillips, what does she do? The moment that Nina Turner starts to criticize Joe Biden and she says that Donald Trump did not bring us into these two wars, that is true. That's a fact. But the problem that Abby Phillips has is the fact that that statement came from someone who's on the left. But that's the truth. The guy who said that he was running on the soul of America, bringing people together, sure has really torn people apart. If you think about it, I'm running on the soul of this country by getting us into two wars, by getting us into two international conflicts. Really? That's what is happening here? By increasing inflation, the cost of goods and everything, that's how you running on the soul? You're running to save the country? Economically, it's a mess. It's a mess. And so Nina is right to call that out. But Abby, in order for her to keep her job on CNN, she got to push back and say, basically, that's a right-wing talking point. This is what they do.
Well, I mean, I want to go back to a second, because Nina is criticizing hot rhetoric and then using the word genocide. This is in no way, shape, or form a genocide. Let's remember how this started on October 7th. You had thousands of terrorists going across the border. And I'm not going to use the word kill. I'm not going to use the word murder. They went across to behead, to decapitate, to dismember people, to kill babies, to
He's still talking about the decapitated babies thing, which has already been debunked. Notice how he said this started October 7th. This did not start October 7th. This started a long time ago, since the people have been occupied. The people have been, oppressed. The people have been basically held captive in an open air prison. This did not start on October 7th. You can tell that he was Hillary Clinton's former advisor, because he has the same talking points that Hillary Clinton has. By the way, I don't know why she would have invited him on anyway. Abby, why do you want to take advice from someone who was an advisor to a losing candidate? Let's see what the advisor to the candidate that lost to Donald Trump has to say. What's your advice on this situation? How do you feel about these things? Apparently, his advice and his advising to Hillary Clinton wasn't that great, because she lost.
To just absolutely decimate a society. If anyone's got a genocide, it's the countries and the terrorist groups that have, by the definition of genocide, wanted to eliminate entire people. Israel, going back to its inception, has made peace with every Arab neighbor that has wanted to make peace. They have never.
That's a lie. Who are those neighbors that they made peace with? Did they make peace with Lebanon? Did they make peace with Syria? No, they're bombing them. And this isn't the first time. I brought this up on Rising briefly. I talked about Ronald Reagan. A lot of people don't know about this, so here's a little history lesson. Did you know that Ronald Reagan actually called for a ceasefire against Israel during his presidency? Same thing we've been asking Joe Biden to do. During that time, Israel was bombing Lebanon. This isn't the first time they've bombed Lebanon. See what I'm saying? So Ronald Reagan called for a ceasefire, even though at that point in time, it was not popular in DC for him to do so. Some of the other politicians actually did not want Ronald Reagan to do that. They were not happy when he did that, but he did it anyway. That came from a conservative. We're going to talk about Ronald Reagan again later on tonight, too, when we get to the RFK thing, because there's a couple things that Ronald Reagan did that I don't think a lot of people are aware of.
Said no, they have never walked away from the table. Hamas has done so repeatedly because Hamas doesn't want to make peace, nor does other countries in the region. They want Israel to go away. They are not.
You catch him here, right? You catch what he just said? He said Hamas doesn't want to make peace. He said, nor does the other countries in the region. But just before that, he said Israel has made peace with any Arab country that wants to make peace. So if he's now telling you that none of the other countries in the region want to make peace, who did they make peace with? Gotcha.
Protecting.
What Hamas has done
Go ahead.
is horrific. No doubt about it. I never say it. They were wrong morally and they broke international law. What is happening to innocent Palestinians, babies, women, just people in general, we have got to say that humanity must stand up and speak. And so it is patently,
you know what? The people who can stop this,
to deny people electricity and food and water and the health care that they need in the times of crisis. That is genocide is happening.
Then what should happen tomorrow? There is nothing stopping Hamas from releasing the more than 200 hostages, which, by the way, dozens are American citizens. There is nothing stopping them from ceding the territory and the tunnels and the infrastructure they have. They are using the very people that you are citing, which it is heartbreaking to see what's happening. It is heartbreaking for anyone, for any innocent, any age, of any type, to be killed, to be a casualty of this, but it is Hamas that is doing to them. Pure.
What does that have to do with the state of Israel cutting off water and food and electricity to the civilians? What does that have to do with that? We're going to ignore, and if I were Nina, I would have brought up what Netanyahu has discussed publicly about the Greater Israel plan. I would have brought that up to prove him wrong in reference to the expansion and to prove him wrong in reference to the genocide.
Simple.
They should
Hamas
release the
based their
hostages.
terror attack out.
They should definitely release the hostages.
I know you're saying it like it's just a go away.
That innocent, but that doesn't mean, Philip, that innocent civilians who have nothing to do with the horrors of Hamas should be held hostage.
But why are they in civilian areas? They're in civilian areas with Hamas.
being murdered and being killed. That's all. I mean, and I'm not the only one that feels that way. The majority of American people said,
Let me pause here for a second. First of all, they have acknowledged multiple times that they're in the tunnels. This was an excuse for the state of Israel to obliterate these people. We can't sit up here and forget and pretend like these people have not been held captive for decades. We can't sit up here and pretend that these people weren't taken from their homes, that they weren't dragged off their own land. We can't sit up here and pretend that those things did not happen. And also, we can't sit up here and pretend that Israel right now is not doing the same thing in the West Bank where they're removing people from their homes. The UN has already declared that the settlements that Israel is creating in the West Bank are illegal. But Felipe isn't going to mention that. This is not just about Gaza. This is about what Israel has been doing to other populations in that area because they want to expand and they want to create a greater Israel. These are things that really have to be mentioned.
I know. Fire and let's
I don't know if the majority is. I don't.
To peace.
I think, Nina, one of the things, though, is
the
that
way to peace is not kill 1,300 innocent civilians.
Oh, now the number's 1,300. So you guys see how the number continues to change. By the way, Abby Phillips, who's the commentator here, who knows what the number is now, doesn't even correct him on that number. So we went from 1,400 to 1,200, and now Felipe's saying 1,300. Where's the pushback? None. When are they going to release? We want to talk about the hostages. At the same time, we need to say, when is Israel going to release the Palestinian hostages?
Remember how this
it is
started.
not to kill
On October
14,000
Palestinians
either. The cries of Palestinian babies matter just as much as the cries of Israeli babies.
I think both of you are really showing
innocent lives matter.
You are showing this is the rift we're talking about.
It's a legitimate argument.
It is absolutely. But I think one of the things, Nina, and this will be our last word before I let you both go. All the Democratic presidents prior to Joe Biden have maintained more or less the same policy toward Israel, which is to support Israel as an ally to the United States.
Let me say something really quick here about Abby, because she really is the weakest of the weak on CNN. And you'll see the difference when I show you the Jill Stein interview, which has a different commentator from CNN. Let me explain something. So Abby says all of the presidents have had the same policy when it comes to Israel. All the Democrat presidents have had the same policy. Well, you know what, Abby? At one point in time, all the presidents had slaves too. Should we have continued slavery, Abby? Huh? Would you have said that towards Abraham Lincoln when he said, you know what, I think we need to free the slaves? Would you have said, excuse me, President Lincoln, but all the presidents have had slaves? Just because something has been done repeatedly doesn't mean it is right. I want to say that again. Just because something has been done repeatedly doesn't mean that it was right. So do all those other presidents, they were in the wrong, Abby. They were in the wrong.
So, and I think you could expect more or less the same policy even from a Republican administration. So if you're sitting in your shoes, Nina, and the shoes of those on the left, is there really a choice here between someone who's going to move away from Israel and someone who's going to stick with Israel? It seems like that's been the policy of the United States, Democratic or Republican.
Slavery was also a policy, Abby. Slavery was a policy. Jim Crow laws were policies. Should we have kept those in place, Abby? You want to think about these things, guys. Think about it. At one point in time, it was illegal in this country for LGBTQ people to marry. Should we have kept that policy, Abby? Do you see how stupid this sounds?
The choice, Abby, is to do the right thing. Should every ally of the United States be able to just commit genocide or do whatever it takes to win at all costs?
It's not genocide.
When the entire world is saying, let's have a ceasefire. America has plenty of allies. I get that Israel is ally. That's a good thing. It is also on America to stand up and be a leader towards peace and not to allow innocent people to languish and to die. And this is not a left issue. This is a humanitarian issue. And I can guarantee you, Abby, that most of those people are polled or not. The people who were polled are not necessarily calling themselves progressives. They are saying we want a ceasefire because what happens over there happens over here. And the way to get peace for both people is to have a ceasefire. Let's get the hostages back and let's negotiate a lasting peace. And I see the role of the United States of America as pivotal to doing just that.
We'll have to leave.
Let me say something really quick here, because I just really do feel like Abby just you're not giving no energy, no push, like nothing. It's just, for me, you got to understand a lot of these people that have these spots. There's a reason why you don't see other people in these spots. There's a reason why you don't see them hire someone like Kim Iverson. There's a reason why you don't see them hire someone like Abby Martin. I don't think they would take these jobs anyway, but there's a reason why they're not wanting to reach out to those people. Because the thing is that as long as you sit there and you defend the State Department talking points, you defend the president that your network is backing, the party that they're backing, you can have a gig like that. But I don't understand how people like Abby Phillips goes home and sleeps at night with these talking points that she has. I mean, even I look back on it, and Don Lemon, through all his craziness, even he will push back sometimes. But I feel like with her, she just, but Nina, you know, all the other presidents have da-da-da. Really?
Leave it there. Nina Turner. And
Nina,
Philippe
I have to just say, Hamas has refused to talk peace. Period.
I want to just one last.
I'm sorry. That's also not true. Not you, Oracle, but that's true. They wouldn't hire Bree either. But yeah, that's not true. There have been multiple times when there have been agreements. We can talk about the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002. See, this is why they bring on Nina, but they won't bring on someone like Max Blumenthal. They won't bring on someone like Katie Halper, someone that is very, very, very knowledgeable about this particular issue. This is not to say that Nina doesn't understand what's going on, but I'm talking about these are Jewish Americans that have been there. And they have seen it for their own eyes, and they know the history through and through. This is why they don't bring them on CNN. You guys understand? This is how they control the narrative. This is how. This is why they don't bring on like a Norm Finkelstein. Because they don't want someone that's going to come on there and is going to tell the truth about the history.
Last point, to Philippe's point, Hamas has in its charter the elimination of the state of Israel. And the language about genocide is there on the left, but Israel's objective is not to wipe out the Palestinian people as its policy. And I think that's the point Philippe is trying to make.
So we're going to debunk that, what she just said, because she's just bold-faced lying. Netanyahu, other people have said this publicly. We're going to debunk that.
But I think we have to
Exactly right.
we have to leave it there, both of you. Thank you very much. By the hour tonight.
No, I see. This is where Nina should have pushed back and said, Abby, I'm sorry, but you're incorrect. You're incorrect. There have been statements that have made just to show just that. In fact, Katie Halper actually captured this. It says, if you liked watching John Kirby claim Israel isn't engaging in genocide, you'll love watching him say it cross-cut with your leaders, stating that their genocidal intent on video and in print. It's a great watch, and I know you'll enjoy it. So let's just debunk what Abby Phillips just said.
This word genocide is getting thrown around in a pretty inappropriate way by lots of different folks. Israel is not trying to wipe the Palestinian people off the map.
זכור את אשר עשה לך עמלק, נצטווינו. אנו זוכרים ואנו נלחמים.
Amalek, now go and smite Amalek, utterly destroy all that they have and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and butt. We're going to say butt, donkey, whatever. That is 1 Samuel 15:3. You see, I grew up in the church. So I know a little thing or two about some of these Bible verses. Okay. So Abby Phillips, that's one example. Let's continue.
It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It's not true. This rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved, it's absolutely not true.
Israel's not trying to wipe Gaza off the map.
אין חשמל, אין מזון, אין מים, אין דלק. הכל סגור. אנחנו נלחמים בחיות אדם ואנחנו נוהגים בהתאם. אז זה לא תחזור להיות מה שהייתה וחמאס לא יהיה. חסל את הכל.
So you see this, right? He just said, we will eliminate everything. This here is coming from Giora Eland, former head of Israeli National Security Council. Creating a severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza is a necessary means to achieve the goal. You see this, right? You see this, right? See, this is why, like I said, this is why they won't bring on someone like Katie Halper. They won't bring on someone like Max Blumenthal, because they're going to say this. This is what Nina did not say. They're going to say this. Let's go back to this one. Sorry. It says Gaza will become a place where no human being can exist. That's also from the former head of the Israeli National Security Council. Invest this energy in one thing, erasing all of Gaza from the face of the earth. Terrible. Again, another one. Gaza should be erased. But no, these things aren't happening. Far-right minister, nuking Gaza is an option. Population should go to Ireland or deserts. Multiple examples. Multiple examples.
תשמיד את עזה עכשיו. עכשיו. עזה הופכת לדרזדן, כן.
Israel's trying to defend itself against a genocidal terrorist threat. So when we're going to start, if we're going to start using that word, fine, let's use it appropriately.
It's all there. It's all there. And like I said, you know, Nina may not be aware of those things that I just showed you. I don't know. But like I said, the people who are very much entrenched in this, people who have been talking about this for a long, long time, way before October 7th, they would have brought these things up. And that's why CNN won't bring them on. And to go along with that, we're going to bring up this issue about the tunnels. Listen to this, because they said, remember, they said Hamas built those tunnels underneath the hospital. Well, that has also been debunked on CNN, on Abby Phillips' network.
Can I just start by asking you what is your view of whether your government, your military, has done a good enough job of proving their claim that there was a major command center and bunker under Al-Shifa?
It's already known for many years that they have in the bunkers that originally was built by Israeli constructors underneath Shifa, were used as a command post of the Hamas and a kind of a junction of several tunnels, part of the system. I don't know to say to what extent it is a major. It's probably not the only kind of command post. Several others are under other hospitals or in other sensitive places, but it's for sure had been used by Hamas even during this conflict.
Well, when you say it was built by Israeli engineers, did you misspeak?
No, decades ago we were running the place. So we held them. It was many decades ago, probably 4 decades ago, that we helped them to build these bunkers in order to enable more space for the operation of the hospital within the very limited size of this compound.
Right there on CNN. This is why their ratings are so low. You heard what she said? Did you misspeak? She was confused.
Okay. All right. Well, that's sort of thrown me a little bit. So these were there for a long, long time, but you're claiming, or they're claiming, that they're used as a major command center. Anyway, the fact of the matter is,
that's all you need to hear from that. But do you see what's happening? Okay. So that was debunked on Abby Phillips' network. One of the things they mentioned in that interview with Nina Turner was about Western allies. They said that Israel is an ally to the U.S. Well, so are some of these other countries. And some of the other countries like France, they've spoken out for a ceasefire. Macron's called for a ceasefire. South Africa called for a ceasefire. In fact, South Africa did something even better. South Africa's parliament has passed a resolution that urges the government to shutter the embassy of Israel in the country. Listen to this.
91 voted against and 248 voted in favor, and the motion as amended is accordingly agreed to.
Free Palestine.
Because they, of all people, would know. They know apartheid when they see it. South Africa speaking up and speaking out. And it's not just them, because Saudi Arabia, which is also an ally of the United States, although Saudi Arabia has also been dipping its toe into BRICS as well. Saudi Arabia has recently made a statement that they are willing to go to China to solve this issue. They are willing to work together with Xi Jinping to solve this issue. It is the United States that is unwilling to bend. And that is because there are several politicians in DC, as Ralph Nader said, over 400 of them that AIPAC has in their back pocket. That's why. This is why I stress the importance of removing corporate money from electoral politics. The majority of those senators and congressmen and women are bought and paid for, even the ones that claim that they're not. So here is Saudi Arabia speaking out here. Danny Haifong says the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will be heading to China as part of its first stop of a tour dedicated to building pressure for an end to the carnage in Gaza. If you want peace, you don't go to Washington, you go to China. Listen to this.
ستبدأ بإذن الله يوم الاثنين. المحطة الأولى ستكون في الصين، وسننتقل بعدها إلى عدد من العواصم لإيصال الرسالة الواضحة أن لا بد من وقف لإطلاق النار فورا، ولا بد من إدخال المساعدات والاحتياجات الإنسانية إلى غزة فورا كذلك، وأيضا لا بد أن نعمل لإنهاء هذه الأزمة وإنهاء هذه الحرب التي تشن على غزة في أسرع وقت.
So you guys see what's happening? Some of the other countries, this is why like BRICS has been taken off doing these kind of things. Like some of these other countries are like, listen, the United States has dropped the ball, not just in reference to Israel and Gaza, but also in reference to the war in Ukraine. Other countries are pushing back. So I wish that Nina would have brought up the fact that there were Israeli officials that have gone on record making those statements. I think that would have been really effective in that conversation. Let's go to some of the comments here. Z says, Sabby, I didn't know that R.E. Reagan. I know his VP, George H.W. later, when president told Israel to stop settling West Bank or they'd cut off funding. A lot has changed since then. JB says a former Israeli prime minister just confessed to Christiane Amanpour that those tunnels were built by Israel. Yeah. This is why CNN's ratings are so awful. The Oracle says the Democrats know that Nina wants to remain in the party orbit, so they can paint the left in our orbit as extreme and out of line. That's true. This is true. And thank you for the super chat 007. Sabby and I thought Dick Cheney was sadistic. Boy, was I wrong. Biden was way more evil people with him, has way more evil people with him. Trump was the lesser evil after all, SMFH. I don't think either one of them are a less of evil. I think they were both evil. I think they're both corrupt. Speaking of corrupt, actually, let me get that comment on Rockfin first, and we're going to get into this other story that just came my way. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Like to see this, but as far as Toyota, Honda, and Tesla, fuck a raise, give us your entire company. Union is the compromise. The goal is worker ownership. Sab, what you said about those who are already grandfathered in and got theirs and are not looking to help those coming up behind them is exactly why we have not passed the New York Healthcare Act. District Council 37 and teachers' unions big impediment. I think those are two words together there. Biggest impediment. Actually, Sab, 2020 highest turnout in history, which was the fear turnout. 2008 was the inspirational turnout. How many mobsters have said it is more important to be feared than loved? I guess there is something to that. This clown supporter of Hillary exemplifies typical elitist behavior. Also, what Black support RFK? American freedmen or Black non-AF by choice? Some delineation is needed. We're going to break down that story in just a bit, actually. So I do have a bonus story I want to jump to really quick tonight. This is a shorter one, but it is pretty shocking. Susan Sarandon, for those of you, you know her as an actress, but some people also know of her as an activist. Susan Sarandon has been an activist for quite some time. She was also a Bernie supporter. She was very, progressive, but also willing to criticize progressives when needed. She also protested outside of AOC's office. I think this was over a year and a half ago, if I remember correctly. So she is an activist on the ground. And now it appears that her activism for Palestine, for the Palestinians in Gaza, has just cost her her talent agency, actually. Let's go ahead and get into this story. UTA dropped Susan Sarandon as client following recent anti-Semitic remarks she made at a rally in New York. Now, I just want to go ahead and say here, the comments that Susan Sarandon made were not anti-Semitic. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. But you guys see what's already starting to happen, right? So Hollywood's going to blackball her, I think, the same way that they did Rose McGowan. Let's continue. After making controversial remarks at a recent pro-Palestinian rally in New York City, Susan Sarandon has been dropped by UTA as a client. A spokesman from the agency has confirmed. The Dead Man Walking Oscar winner has been present at several pro-Palestinian rallies where she made several remarks that included, there are a lot of people afraid of being Jewish at this time and are getting a taste of what it feels like to be a Muslim in this country. She also went on to repost on X a pro-Palestinian post from Pink Floyd Roger Waters, who has been criticized over the years for his anti-Semitic remarks. Again, Roger Waters is not making anti-Semitic remarks. This is very, very dangerous. That someone's entire career can just be ruined. They can lose their jobs, lose their agencies. And it's not just her, but this is happening across the board. People, students that are graduating from college, already rejected from job offers. We are living in a very dangerous time. And I can tell you this much. Nobody seems to get this kind of heat when they do offensive things towards Black people or even killing Black people. I'll give you a couple examples. The police officer that shot Oscar Grant in the back when he was laying on his stomach on the ground with his hands handcuffed behind his back, served 1 year. No problem getting another job. That's something I want you to think about. How people can just go on with their lives. The police officers that beat Rodney King got off the first time, brought him back the second time. Technically, that would be considered double jeopardy, but I guess because of the situation, they made an exception. Brought them back the second time, served very little jail time. Afterwards, had no problem getting a job. It goes on to say Sarandon being dropped from UTA is another instance in recent weeks of talent agencies making tough decisions when it comes to clients or agents making public statements on the war in Israel. Last month, CAA co-head of film, Maha Dakil, resigned from the agency's board after she reposted an Instagram story that said, "You're currently learning who supports genocide." So I'm going to show you a video of Susan Sarandon in just a second, but I do want to say this. Because the thing is, it's not just happening to Susan Sarandon. It's happening to students. It's happening to graduates. It has gotten to the point now where you can't even criticize the government. You can't criticize the government of Israel without people saying that you're anti-Semitic. Some people can't criticize Netanyahu, far right-wing extremist Netanyahu. Now, it's okay to criticize Trump and keep your job, but you criticize Netanyahu, now it's not okay to keep your job. We have to get lobbyists out of DC. None of these politicians should answer to lobbyists. None of these politicians should answer to corporate interests or to the military-industrial complex. None of them should answer to AIPAC. None of these organizations. The only people they should be answering to is their constituents. And this wasn't always the case. So if they can release someone as talented and someone as big as Susan Sarandon, she's a huge star. How many of you remember Susan Sarandon from Rocky Horror Picture Show? How many? She's been acting for years. She's an Oscar winner. If they can release her, they can release anyone. I want to show you one of the speeches that she gave at one of the protests. Now, this is from Laura. She's part of Red Berets. She said, Susan Sarandon is a powerful movement voice for truth, love, and justice. With her consistency and unwavering solidarity, she is healing us. That was another thing. Susan Sarandon's also part of the Healing Us documentary. She supported Medicare for all. Like I said, she's been an activist for a long time. Listen to this.
Stand here in my cruelly given white privilege to say that you don't have to be Palestinian to stand with the Palestinian people. You do not have to be Palestinian to understand that the slaughter of almost 5,000 children is unacceptable and a war crime. You do not have to be Palestinian to understand that war crimes are being delivered every single day, according to the UN and other humanitarian groups. This is a time for education, because as a previous speaker mentioned, so many people do not understand the context in which this October 7th assault happened. They don't understand the history of what has been happening to the Palestinian people for 75 years.
Yep. And also mainstream media doesn't want you to know about that history either. That's why you don't hear them bring it up. That's why you won't see them bring on people who want to bring it up.
This is an opportunity to educate people if they can have an open mind. If you can get beyond the tribal instincts that have separated us now for so long. It's time to have an open heart. It's time to be strong, and it's time that Palestine be free.
So Leroy says, Susan clapping at Sagar without realizing she is. Remember when he read, like, you're not even Palestinian, why do you care? He's a wild snake. Yeah. So yeah, right. You don't have to be Palestinian to care about the Palestinian people's, suffering and their self-determination. Just like you didn't have to be Black to care about the civil rights movement. And I think that we are seeing something happen here. And I think a lot of people are becoming more fearful, but I want you to know this is exactly what they want to happen. They want you to become afraid. They want you to be afraid to speak out. They tried to I want to give you an example. Someone they tried to make an example out of before. How do they try to threaten your free speech? They tried to make an example out of people like Julian Assange, Daniel Hale, Mumia. How do they try to threaten your right to organize and protect your own people and not worry about the government? How did they do that? How did they fight back against that? They went after the Black Panther Party. So this is what they do. And you're going to see more of this happening. You're going to see more people being fired, more people being canceled to put fear into you so that you're like, oh God, I don't want to do anything or say anything because I don't want anything to happen to me. But she's been an activist for a long time. And some of you may have met her. I know some of you, I saw pictures before where some of you were at some events that she was at in New York before. March for Medicare for All. She participated in that as well. Like, she's a real one. Dana says Susan Sarandon rocks. Yeah, she's a real one. I will say at least she shows up. Like, she does show up to those things. She showed up to those events, the Medicare for All marches. Right? She showed up to those events when our politicians, like squad members, did not. She was there. She doesn't have to do this. I want people to understand Susan Sarandon does not have to do this. She can just live a cushy, lavish lifestyle and just engage in the Hollywood theatrics and just grab her bag and just hush all the noise. She doesn't have to go out and protest. She doesn't have to be an activist. She doesn't have to try to fight for any of these things. And her life would actually be much easier if she did that. It would be much easier for her if she just pretended these things were not going on, like a lot of celebrities do. But if they can release her, someone with that resume, they can release anyone. Let me go to some of the comments here. JB said, yep, Susan is what we call a class traitor. She has solidarity with workers and the poor. Thank you so much for that. Steve says Susan hits the streets. Yes, she does. Let me go to some of the comments here. JB also said, this is a new McCarthy era for anyone that speaks out against Israel. Here we go. Here we go. Thank you for the super chat, Kush Renata. Taking people's jobs and money for not running with the narrative is not just a pandemic thing. Also, just like the jab, they will change actual definitions. Thank you for the super chat, Raphael. Nope, this is a sign they know they are losing. This is a sign they know they are losing. Sherry says she uses her platform for good, right? Z Manny says, I remember when Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins were calling out the Guantanamo Bay detention during the Oscars. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. And thank you for this super chat, Raphael. Sister, give me your perspective. Do you think Malcolm and Martin knew a day would come when the South African president would give a speech like this, like the one this morning by himself for real? I do. I think they knew that this day was coming. I also think that they knew that they would probably not be around for it. Also think that's why we don't have any more revolutionary leaders after that. Because they decided to remove our revolutionary leaders, right? But yeah, Susan is on Twitter. Go give her a shout out. Show her some love because that's wild. I mean, honestly, if I was Susan, I would just tell UTA, look, you're dropping me? Okay, cool. I'll start my own company. There you go. Start your own production company and make your workers go up. All right. Let's get to the story about RFK Jr. and black voters. Holy smokes. So this one actually caught me by surprise, but I did a deeper dive into this, and I think I know what's happening. So if you have not heard, it appears that RFK Jr. is not only winning support from young voters between the ages of 18 to 34. I can talk about that a little bit later. But apparently now, RFK Jr. is gaining support among black voters, particularly in the battleground states. Let's go ahead and get into this discussion here from Morning Joe, where they are freaking out. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Let's do the damn thing.
All right. So let's talk about these polls that taken a year out from the election that I would say don't really mean anything on who's going to ultimately win. But if I were,
what are they? A snapshot into
snapshot of where people are right now. But if I were on the Biden campaign or any campaign that got these type of polls, I'd love them, because I would be using them to get everybody working from the top to bottom, get them working as hard as they can to double their efforts on these areas that there's some, we're seeing some softness again a year out. So these are actually, somebody said this yesterday, and I'm sure Jim Messina and others who come on the show would say the same thing. Use these polls as a way to inspire your troops to work harder, work longer, campaign more, especially when you got an autocrat running against you and nothing short of American democracy's on the line. If that can't inspire you,
I don't know what does, but
go into professional bowling.
The polling shows President Biden is losing support among black voters. The White House is vowing not to, quote, make the mistake of underestimating a key group that helped propel Biden to victory in 2020.
A key group that helped propel Democrat presidents in my adult lifetime, all of them to victory. So this isn't new news. We have been seeing this over the past year, that black support for Joe Biden has continued to decrease. So this isn't a new thing. And I want you to know that Joe, I think his name is Joe and Mika, these are very wealthy people. They're well off. They're very privileged. They have nothing to gain. Well, they have more to gain, excuse me. They still can have more to gain within their careers, but they don't have anything to lose. These people are very well off. Amika, if I remember correctly, I think her dad also worked in DC spaces. She was already deeply entrenched in DC politics. So these people, just keep in mind where the message is coming from.
In a new interview with NBC News, Biden's principal deputy campaign manager acknowledged that for the president to win again in 2024, his team, quote, has to have a long, sustained conversations with African Americans in their communities and can't simply, quote, parachute in around election time.
No.
This comes after a recent survey from the New York Times and Siena College showed Biden's seating support from black battleground state voters to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Okay, so this is what's happening here. Apparently, some of the black voter support that originally was for Joe Biden is now going to RFK Jr. Now, I want to point out something else. Some of that support has also gone to Donald Trump. Now, again, this is the battleground states, okay? So at one point, Donald Trump had like 8% of the black vote on a national level. Then he had like 11% approval of black voters earlier this year on the national level. Now we are seeing Donald Trump has 13% of black support in those battleground states. So this is going to be very telling, especially if RFK Jr. stays in the race the entire time. He is getting that support. Some of those black supporters in those states that did support Joe Biden are now supporting RFK Jr. I have a theory about this, but I want to let this play a little bit more.
For more on that, let's bring in opinion editor at the Washington Post, Alexi McCammond. Her latest piece is entitled, Democrats Need to Get Real About RFK Jr.'s Strength with Black Voters. Alexi, where is it coming from?
Hey, well, thank you so much for having me. I mean, I think what Joe said is right. So a couple of disclaimers off the top. Polls are not gospel. It's a year out, and Black voters are not a monolith. But one thing that is clear in polling trends, focus group trends, and otherwise is that Black voters and other voters are looking for an alternative. Black voters have long felt and said and showed us that they feel taken for granted by the Democratic Party. We've seen the ways in which VP Harris hasn't been supported as much as some folks would like by the Democratic Party, by President Biden. And the real kicker with RFK Jr., and something that is particularly unique to him, is that he taps into this deep-seated, deep-rooted medical skepticism that a lot of Black folks across the country feel, rightfully so. There has been medical racism going back, to the 1800s through now. There is ample reason why folks might feel distrustful of their healthcare providers or of what even the government is telling us we should do with our bodies with respect to vaccines. Now, that is not to say that everything RFK Jr. says about vaccines is directly appealing to Black voters, but when he talks about these things and brings up the idea that actually maybe they're lying to you or maybe you shouldn't take this vaccine, he's really trying to get at what other folks aren't saying to these voters, which is...
I'm sorry. I'm just going to pause there for a second. I don't think that is really the reason. That may have something to do with it, but I think we have to think about it like this. If you're unhappy with the job that Joe Biden has done, if you're unhappy economically in this country, which is the number one thing that voters who are polled are concerned about, is the economy. So if your financial well-being is worse now under Joe Biden than it was under Donald Trump, and you are African-American and you're looking to move away from Joe Biden and you don't want to vote for him again in 2024, well, then you start to look around at the other options, right? One of the things, and we're going to debunk this tonight, because one of the things that is going around, particularly on social media, is that RFK Jr. has a reparations plan, that he supports reparations. So what he supports, we're going to talk about what he actually supports and what he does not support. So there's a difference between what Black people those who are actually asking for reparations, there's a difference between those who have that lineage, what they're asking for, and what RFK Jr.'s reparations plan is. So we're going to debunk that tonight. We're going to break that down because people are not telling the truth. And I have the video footage to show it with him saying this himself. So that could also be part of the reason why some of those voters may be finding RFK Jr. more appealing. So let's continue.
I hear you. I see you. I understand why you might feel this way.
Rev, curious about your thoughts. I know you have a question for Alexi, but first, can you respond to that about Kennedy playing into a deep skepticism that a lot of members of the Black community have of the medical community?
No, he has definitely played into that, and there is definitely a skepticism, no matter how much we may feel that it is unfounded. People have real skepticism based on history, Tuskegee experiment just being one, about vaccines, and Robert Jr. has played into that. He's also been one that's been a hero in the environmental movement, environmental racism, that many of us supported his raising that prior to his running. But
that's the other reason that I was going to mention as well. His experience as an environmental lawyer, working in those particular areas where they were affected by environmental pollution, not just in the United States, but across the world. He's gone to Latin America as well. That's another key thing that may be moving some people over. But I think, again, if you're upset with Joe Biden's job and financially, your financial well-being is worse now than it was under Donald Trump, but you don't want to vote for Donald Trump. Obviously, if you still want to vote, you're going to start looking elsewhere. There could also be this, the fact that his last name is Kennedy. So some people who may not be really familiar with RFK Jr., they see the name Kennedy and it's like, oh, a Kennedy. So that's something else that's come across that I've noticed in discussions that I've been having with people as well. Like I'll tell people, oh, did you know all these different people are running for president? When I would get to RFK Jr.'s name, they would say, oh, okay, oh, a Kennedy. But I realized a lot of the people that I was talking to didn't actually know who RFK Jr. was. They just heard Kennedy, and that was appealing to them. So there's the Kennedy name recognition as well.
Having said that, Alexei, the fact that a lot of the bizarre stuff, both politically as well as in terms of policy that Robert has brought out, has not been really confronted or countered by the Biden administration. So don't you think that some of what Robert's growing popularity or growing support among some blacks is because he's not been challenged by the Biden supporters on some of the things that he says that are completely out of line with the way a lot of blacks think?
But he has been challenged, though. He has been challenged. When he first announced his campaign, he was challenged on CNN. He's not challenged as much on Fox News because they seem to like a lot of his policies, but he has been challenged. I will say, though, particularly when we look at the progressive platforms, he has not really appeared on most of the progressive platforms. He has not appeared on Useful Idiots, The Gray Zone, Katie Halper Show. He has not appeared on Bad Faith. And this is not to say these things will not happen. But I do know that there are people within this space that have reached out multiple times to have him come on to the show. People who are left commentators, and there is either no response or there's the response like what Max Blumenthal received, right? Where it's like, no, it's not happening. So he seems to be somewhat avoiding people who are going to be very knowledgeable about this issue of Israel and Gaza. He is avoiding those shows. And I said before, I think that's a mistake, but it appears to me that RFK Jr. is not trying to go after the progressive left vote. It seems like he's trying to go after the independents, maybe some of the libertarians, and some of the people that voted for Trump but don't want to vote for Trump again this time around. Since he has left the Democratic Party as a candidate and he has announced his candidacy as an independent, he has increased in the polls. So this is different from what we may have seen in the past. This exact same thing could have happened to Bernie Sanders if he were willing to have left the Democratic Party, which is what we wanted him to do, and run as an independent when they cheated him in 2016. So this is something that I want you to be aware of. This is the same type of support that Bernie Sanders could have had if he ran as an independent, actually possibly even more support. The fact that RFK Jr. is sitting over 15%, his numbers have increased and he's an independent. If we were going into the debates today, he's already eligible to be on the debate stage. And if he is on the debate stage, that is going to be a problem for Joe Biden. It is just a reality. Listen, I'm not voting for RFK Jr. I don't like his position on Israel and Palestine. It is what it is. I don't like the fact that his reparations policy is not what people really want in reference to reparations. So he's not my candidate. But the reality is, right now, he is the most, I would say, right now, if the election were today, he is the independent or third party / candidate that is going to really have an impact on this election. The numbers do not lie. And I don't say that lightly. Like, again, he is not my candidate. But the reality is, based on the numbers, based on the support that he is getting right now, he is a threat to both Joe Biden and to Donald Trump.
I think yes and no. Yes, because when he was briefly running in the Democratic primary against Biden, he was getting a lot of attention. We were all giving him a lot of attention for, the things he was saying at private dinners and otherwise about vaccines, casting doubt on these things, and about some of the more outlandish views he had. And that obviously dipped support with some Democratic voters at the time. I think the smartest thing he's done is get out of that primary and run as an independent, because it takes the heat off of him from the major parties. I know that Joe Biden's campaign doesn't even really want to take him seriously. They think and maintain that voters will see this as a two-person race between Biden and Donald Trump. everything suggests otherwise at this point, that voters are looking for alternatives, that they want it to be anyone but Biden and Trump. And I think that, black voters are hearing a lot from RFK Jr. about other things beyond vaccines. And I think that's the big issue. He's couching a lot of this stuff in terms of civil rights, as I'm sure you know, Rev. And he's also talking a lot like Milei, who was just elected in Argentina, this sort of populist rhetoric that's painting a very hopeful vision for the future. And he's not really focusing on those other sort of outlandish things. And so to your point, sure, maybe if Democrats focused on those things, people would be more aware and maybe reconsider or think more holistically about who he is. But he's really staying away from those things. And the Biden campaign so far is sort of considering him as a non-starter.
Well, the Biden campaign should start to think again, because he is going to be a threat. I just want to show you this here because I saw someone questioning Donald Trump's support. So I just want to show you something and I'll go back to the video because I seem to remember this very well. Even though Donald Trump lost in 2020, Donald Trump did make gains with the black vote. Look at this here. Vox had reported on this after the election. Trump made gains with black voters in some states. And I just want to point out this part right here. Trump won 8% of the black vote, about a 2 percentage point gain on his 2016 numbers. So that's important for people to understand. Even though Donald Trump lost in 2020, he still gained support among black voters. And now his approval rating seems to be higher among black voters. Let's go ahead and get back into this video here.
Jonathan, let me hear a few things. First of all, there is the obstacle of Robert Kennedy Jr. getting on the ballot on a lot of states. We'll actually see as we move forward whether he's going to be able to do that or not. As an independent, he certainly has more time to clear the hurdles if he decides that he wants to do that. But I find Alexi's reporting fascinating because you actually have Kennedy. You have two stories here, a tale of two stories. One, he takes away from Donald Trump more than Biden in many polls that we've seen, despite the fact he takes one of the most critical electorates. He takes a good chunk of one of the most critical electorates away from Joe Biden. That is black voters. Of course, it is early. And I suspect that what will happen this year is what happens every year. Though there can be a change that people come home, whether it's young voters, whether it's people of color. All of these outlandish predictions I heard going into the 2020 election ended up being outlandish. I suspect the same will be true here, but the Biden.
The 2020, I'm sorry, that's not a good comparison. In the 2020 election, we did not have an independent candidate polling this high. Now, obviously, it is harder to get ballot access as an independent and as a third party candidate. But I don't think RFK Jr. is going to struggle the way that others may because he has the money. This is the piece that they're not mentioning on Morning Joe. Maybe they haven't paid attention to this yet, but I talked about his funding numbers and his donations and where the money's coming from. RFK Jr. is getting donations from billionaires. It's on the FEC report. You can go look this up yourself. He's getting donations from billionaires. So there's a lot of big money coming in. He has millions. He's raised millions and millions of dollars. So in order for him to get on the ballot, you got two options, right? You go through the signature process. You got to get people on the ground game going and people to gather those signatures, etc. But you can also buy your way onto the ballot, just like someone like Ross Perot. So RFK Jr., the amount of money that he has raised, he can buy his way onto the ballot in some of these states. And honestly, what he could be doing, and I'm not sure, but what he could be doing is he could be focusing strategically on those swing states. I know he's been in New Hampshire a lot. I'm in Massachusetts, is right to the north of me. So I know he's been in New Hampshire a lot. But one of the things I will say is that he hit the ground running from the moment that he announced his campaign. They organized people on the ground from the moment he announced his campaign. I will say that again, he is not my candidate. But when it comes to the organizing, he was on it. Now, things have happened. Dennis Kucinich left the campaign. He decided to hire his daughter-in-law as his new campaign manager. She's former CIA. We already talked about that. You know how I feel about that. But all in all, RFK Jr. has not decreased in the polls. He is increasing in the polls, and he already has a ground game. So I don't think he's going to run into as much trouble with the ballot access issue if he has the ground game and he already has millions of dollars.
Campaign does have to worry about this, don't they?
Biden campaign officials are deeply worried about third-party candidates. Though they don't want to give them much in the way of oxygen by talking about them, at least not now. Still believing that many of them will eventually drop out between now and when the ballots are actually cast. But you're right, RFK Jr. Appeals to sort of the conspiracy theorist group that draws from Trump. But yes, maybe black voters from Biden. And of course, he's not the only potential third-party candidate. Jill Stein, Cornel West, who might have some appeal to black voters. Joe Manchin is also considering getting in, maybe under the No Labels banner. So
notice how they never mentioned Claudia De La Cruz or Dr. Shiva, who are also running outside the duopoly. Claudia De La Cruz is running through PSL and Dr. Shiva is running independent. It's interesting they don't mention their names, and it could be just because of name recognition. They're mentioning the names they know more people are going to be familiar with, but I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that as well.
Alexi, we know that the third-party candidates are a threat, but there's also an issue about enthusiasm, particularly among voters of color. That's something that the Biden team has struggled with. You know, even in 2020, they ran behind what previous Democrats have done. And I think there are real concerns about this time around as well. So in terms of Democratic officials you speak to, how worried are they? And what can the Biden team do to energize young voters, but particularly young voters of color?
Yeah, I mean, the statements from Quentin Folks and others from the Biden campaign show that they are keenly aware of what they need to do, which is not take them for granted and not parachute in, as he said, in the 11th hour. That is clear. I think the problem is that a lot of this is sort of baked in the cake. I mean, like, you look at the relationship between Biden and VP Harris, and I know that a lot of black folks would have liked to see more support for her throughout this first term from Biden and other Democrats, and that's something you can't really undo. Biden also needs to give these folks a reason to be excited, a reason to vote for him. And a lot of voters are sick of casting a throwaway ballot, or what they say is a ballot for the lesser of two evils. And that's one of the big differences between, I think, 2016, 2020, and 2024. I think especially after the COVID pandemic, people feel much more individualistic. They're much more concerned about themselves than they are with group affiliation. That diminishes Democratic Party loyalty, that diminishes loyalty folks might have had to Biden in the past, thinking he would do the right thing. So it's more than just saying the right thing. And I think lastly, VP Harris has been the one, if you look at these same polls, who's keeping Biden in the game. I mean, she's getting support with younger voters, with voters of color, these constituencies that they need to win to keep that coalition together. That was surprising from those polls. I know that a lot of folks, we were sort of thinking she wouldn't have a strong coalition, just as she didn't in 2020. But she's been going on these college campus tours and talking to these people that the Biden folks need to do a better effort putting Biden in front of.
I'm sorry. People, black voters are not pulling away from Joe Biden because there's not enough attention being given to Kamala Harris. Black voters are pulling away from Joe Biden because economically we are struggling in this country. Because you made a lot of promises, Joe Biden, that you would do for the black community that you reneged. He promised that he would, basically cancel student loan debt for those that went to HBCUs that made under, I think it was $125,000, something like that. He promised that while he was running for president. That never happened. He promised that he would give those $2,000 checks to people in Georgia if they put Warnock and Ossoff in office. He shortchanged the checks and then tried to tell us we had already got part of the check from under Trump's administration. But you can give billions of dollars to Ukraine. You can give $8.3 billion to Israel every year. But when it comes to the American people, you promise us $2,000 checks and you shortchange the checks. And then not only that, some people didn't even get the checks. You can't continue to do this to black people and expect them to continue to come out and support you. And I said it before and I say it again. Barack Obama got 95% of the black vote in 2008. He got 93% for his reelection in 2012. Neither Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden have been able to come close to that. There is a reason for that. Now, don't get me wrong. Obama was also a con artist. He was able to win people over because he was a little bit more charismatic and he told us there was hope and there was change, but he was just bought and sold out as the rest of them. Now, I want to get to this clip as well, where it says, case study QB, thank you. Asking if RFK Jr.'s growing support among blacks is because he hasn't been challenged by Biden supporters. One of the things it said here is, I think the smartest thing he's done is get out of the primary and run as an independent. I want to harp on this just again, one more second, because this is very important.
So don't you think that some of what Robert's growing popularity or growing support among some blacks is because he's not been challenged by the Biden supporters on some of the things that he says that are completely out of line with the way a lot of blacks think?
I think yes and no. Yes, because when he was briefly running in the Democratic primary against Biden, he was getting a lot of attention. We were all giving him a lot of attention for, the things he was saying at private dinners and otherwise about vaccines, casting doubt on these things, and about some of the more outlandish views he had. And that obviously dipped support with some Democratic voters at the time. I think the smartest thing he's done is get out of that primary and run as an independent, because
that part right there. Get out of the primary and run as an independent. And I did say, even at that point in time, again, I said he's not my candidate, but at that point in time, I did say that I applaud him for doing what Bernie Sanders did not have the guts to do, leaving the party and running as an independent. For years, we've heard that you couldn't do this because it would kill your campaign. Now we actually have something to point to and show that is not the case. That is not the case. I don't know why Marianne is still running the Democratic Party. Cenk Uygur, why are you running the Democratic Party? I don't know why these people have not left. Because at the end of the day, we already know the DNC is going to give the nomination to Joe Biden. We already know about the DNC fraud lawsuit. We already know the superdelegates pick who they want, regardless of who we want. So I don't even know why they're still in the Democratic primary race. The DNC is not going to give it to them. Now, there has been this video circulating around on Twitter for people saying RFK Jr. gained support among Black Americans because he has a reparations plan, because he supports reparations. But does RFK Jr. support the type of reparations that reparations activists within the Black community are actually calling for? No, he doesn't. And that's what people are leaving out. You see, I've seen this video. Let me pull this up here. I've seen this video. I watched the entire interview when it happened. So this is just a clip from the interview. The interview is much longer. Watch the entire thing. And it was really interesting to me. People are trying to tell me, look, Sabby, RFK Jr. supports reparations. Will you support him now? It's really weird how people are like begging me to support this dude. I don't know. This is kind of weird. It giving me these weird vibes. Not knowing that I have actually already had watched the entire interview and I heard what he had to say when it came to cash reparations. This is what people need to hear. What RFK Jr. supports is fixing some of the structures, right? Fixing education, helping Black people get business loans, things like that. And I'm not saying those things don't need to happen. Yes, those things should happen. But RFK Jr. does not support cash reparations. And I'm going to show you why this is a problem based on what has happened in this country before historically. Let's get into it. This is the clip that everybody keeps saying, look, listen to what he says. Timestamp 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Listen.
Oh, I would be against cash. If there was no other issue, I would be against cash payment reparations. But
Let's hear that again. Timestamp 6 minutes. We'll go back a little bit, 13 seconds. Listen to this, people.
Well, I would be against cash. If there was no other issue, I would be against cash payment reparations. But the word reparation means repair. And, I grew up in a Jim Crow, and I saw this was not just the injury did not end with slavery. The injury and the deliberate suppression, the institutionalization of poverty in Black neighborhoods.
Now, RFK Jr., I'll play a little bit more. He's correct that it didn't end with slavery. He's correct that it also was an issue with Jim Crow. And I'd also add the crime bill, the war on drugs. But he knows all that. But RFK Jr. just told you he does not support cash-based reparations. Now, we're going to let him finish what he's saying. And then I'm going to fast forward to another piece of this discussion because they're actually going to respond to RFK Jr. There's a statement that he makes that kind of just threw people off a little bit. They're going to respond to him and tell them what they think. And then I'm going to show you why, based on history in this country, him not supporting cash reparations is a problem. Listen to this.
Is systematic, it's systemic, and it continues today in a million different ways. And we need to rebuild the Black communities. And so that, my approach to doing that would be to do it in a way that I think is going to be most effective, which is what we did at Stein. We created what we call the Community Development Corporation there, and it is now the model for hundreds of community development corporations around the country because it works. And that it's less likely to contribute to the polarization between Blacks and whites because it benefits everybody. Everybody, even people who are Trumpers, who I see all the time because I represent them in lawsuits against big ballooners. If you talk about business loans to Black communities, everybody's for it. Everybody wants business to work and to flourish. And so for me, that would be my approach, to do everything I can to make, and I was in Cleveland.
We'll pause right there. Let's come out of this. So one of the reasons why he is against cash reparations is because other populations would have a problem with it. They're going to respond.
Reparations is about figuring out every way that we can to build Black-owned businesses back up. And if you talk about it in that way, it doesn't inspire the polarization and the racism that if you talk about cash reparations, that reaction.
I hear you, and I hear exactly where you're coming from. But I got to say, with all due respect, we in the Black community, I'll speak for myself, but I think there's other people I speak for too. We in the Black community are not really overly concerned about the feelings of other people who are polarized by the idea of us getting cash reparations back.
That's right. That piece right there. So here you have RFK Jr. basically trying to say to Black people what he thinks that we should have, and then tell us that we should not have cash reparations because other groups may have a problem with it. Look, people, criticize Marianne Williamson a lot, but one thing I will give her credit on this particular point is she has said time and time again, at least the very first time I interviewed her about reparations, she said it was not up to her to decide how the money should be spent. I'll give her credit for that. Now, based on what I've seen from other activists, her dollar amounts were not correct, but I'll give her credit for that, for saying that's not my decision. That's up for Black people to decide. But here's RFK Jr. telling Black people, this is what I think you should get. And I don't think that you should get cash reparations because, quote unquote, it'll be divisive when comparing it to other populations. So their response to them is, we're not really caring about that. We're not really caring about that.
If that hurts your feelings, that's kind of on you. And I'm not really, I'm also, just to continue to circle the wagons, I'm also not really overly interested in what's good for everybody when I start talking about reparations. When we start having that conversation, I'm concerned about what's good for the Black people who have always been systemically behind the 8 ball.
Right.
Due to people who will deny that that system even exists. They'll tell you there is no systemic racism. They'll tell you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which don't exist. That's
after they've stolen your boots, right?
But I'm not even wearing boots. So, please, I completely get what you're saying, and that is one way to do it. But I don't want our financial future, or not even maybe not even financial future, but I don't want reparations contingent on how another group feels about it, or how another group is going to look at it or get upset about it. Like, I think maybe if we admit to the 800-pound gorilla in the room and what that represents and what it's done and what it's continuing to do, maybe now that it's out on the table, we can deal with it. And maybe reparations won't hurt so bad if we're not trying to rewrite the history. If we're not trying to pretend that these things don't exist, there is no systemic racism, you just need to work harder. You had a Black president, so it's not that bad. Like, maybe if we knock that stuff off, reparations won't feel so bad if you get that we're really just paying back what we already said we were doing.
And one thing I want to add to, we need to talk about stolen labor. We need to talk about the fact that you had slaves in this country that worked for free. 400 years of slavery worked for free. And there were other companies that were later formed that profited from slavery. Free labor. So we wouldn't accept that today. I'm gonna let him finish, and then I'm gonna show you a time when nobody seemed to have it. It's a divisive issue when it happened before.
See it from both sides, but I do agree with Mech, because it's not like slavery benefited us. It didn't. So I feel like in the repair or the reparations of that, there shouldn't be a thought of anyone else and how they feel about it. However, I get what he's saying as far as what works over time, what is going to actually fix the community and not just seem like Christmas for 2 weeks and then it's back to regularly scheduled programming.
That's why I said I get it.
All right. So first and foremost, I think you need both. I think you can't just have the institutional repairs, like what RFK talked about, like the education system, the schools, the businesses, the business loans, like things like that. I'm not saying those things aren't an issue. Yes, the education system should be fixed. I told you guys before, one of the ways, the quickest way to do this is to, instead of having property taxes pay for public school funding, instead of doing that, you can do exactly what the U.S. government does for the Dodd schools that I attended when I was growing up, where the U.S. government, the federal government, funds those Dodd schools. And we had everything at those schools. So if the U.S., the federal government, can fund those Dodd schools, the federal government can fund the public schools, and everybody at public school in this country would have an equal resourced education. Just like that. You got billions of dollars to send to Ukraine, you got billions of dollars to fund these public schools in this country, okay? Easy fix. Easy fix. But to go along with the institutional issues that he discussed, you still have to deal with the fact that you had stolen labor, which prevented most slaves in this country from establishing any type of land, and land equals wealth, or home ownership, which also equals wealth. therefore not having any land or home ownership to pass on to future generations. So you're starting from scratch. So the thing is this. I think you need both. But when RFK Jr. says other groups will have a problem with it, I want to show you a time when it seems like other groups didn't really have no problem with it. And this goes back to Ronald Reagan. So this is Ronald Reagan number 2 tonight. This right here. The redress and reparations for Japanese American incarceration. Not everyone knows about this. The Civil Liberties Act of 1988 gave surviving Japanese Americans reparations and a formal apology by President Reagan for their incarceration during World War II. Didn't happen overnight, it says. And here's the picture here. Share this with your friends, guys, because a lot of people don't know about this. Here's the picture here of Ronald Reagan. So we got 2 things Ronald Reagan did that I think a lot of people knew about. Number 1, he called for a ceasefire against Israel when Israel bombed Lebanon, something that Joe Biden will not do today. Number 2, he signed the Reparations Act for the Japanese Americans in this country. Yes, that happened under Ronald Reagan, a conservative president, and they got cash payments. Let's get into it. I'm going to jump down to this part right about here. I'm not going to read the whole article, but I can share the link in the chat. I want to get to the money part. Let me go down here. And it's talking about the story of Mass. She's talking about her experience. So it says here, let's highlight this for the folks in the back. Mass's experience led her to become a cynical social worker and participate in the redress movement that culminated with the passage of the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. Let me outline or highlight this part here. This law gave surviving Japanese Americans $20,000 in reparations and a formal apology by President Reagan for their incarceration during World War II. Somebody share that with RFK Jr. So, don't come to me with, we can't do the cash payments because then it'll be divisive. First of all, reparations is supposed to be based on lineage. It's not just for everyone who consider themselves to be Black. It's based on lineage. And then number 2, show people how they gave cash reparations to the Japanese Americans. Some people will say it should have been more than that. Point that I'm making is, was it divisive then? Or is it only divisive when it happens for Black people? We got to wake up, people. We got to wake up. So that's part of the reason why I do think some Black voters are choosing to support RFK Jr. because that has been going around on social media that he has a reparations plan. But if you actually look at it, it's not what we're owed. And it's not what reparation activists are asking for. Sorry. But to that point, he is gaining Black voters and Joe Biden is losing Black voters. Right now, if we're looking at the race for 2024, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and RFK Jr. are likely to be on the debate stage. Let's go to some of the comments. Thank you, Matt. Peace and love to Sabby and Eric. Thank you for what you are doing. Thank you, Mr. Matt. Jessica says, if he wasn't so pro-Israel, I would have voted for him. Yeah. For me, he'd have to have the right position on Israel and Gaza, which he does not have. And he said some horrific things about Palestinians that I do not approve of. And number 2, I just showed you the mofo is against cash reparations because it might make other groups feel bad. I ain't got time for it. Next, Rick says reparations has to be specific. Yes, it does. Thank you, Jesse. Jill Stein should make Jesse Ventura her VP. I interviewed Jesse Ventura a while back. It's been a minute. I should invite him back on. Keith says Dr. West is for reparations. Yes, he is. And so is Jill. And so is Claudia. Thank you for the super sticker, Darnell Barnett, ED. EDD is in the house. And thank you for this super sticker as well, Darnell. Thank you, Janice. It's a debt owed for stolen labor. Yes. Thank you, Janice. Janice gets it. Sebastian says, where's the reparations for Haiti? Haiti would need to get reparations from France. No shade to my Haitian peeps, but Haiti would need to go to France and ask for reparations, which is weird because at one point, Haiti actually paid reparations to France. It's crazy. Deneen, it's not our fault you waited 150 years to pay your debt. Thank you, M. Smith. Companies are stealing labor right now. How many people do you know doing the work of numerous people at one job for one salary? We talked about that before. We talked about it was connected to quiet hiring. Thank you, Willis. Thank you for staying on code, Sabby. We're tired of the BS. Yes, we are. And thank you, Kushvanada. So true that we have a blueprint to give Black reparations. I agree with that process, but how do we get past the whole, but you weren't a slave BS? Again, it's based on lineage, and it's about wealth and debt that was stolen, that never was given the opportunity to be passed on to future generations. That's how I would frame it. Moving on. Okay. Oh, did I finish up? Where am I now? Oh, am I still on RFK? Whoops. Sorry. When you edit this, Eric, I'm sorry. Sorry, Eric. There's also this issue. Joe Biden is also losing support from Muslim voters. I forgot about this clip as well. So it's the Black community, it's the Muslim community, and also younger voters. So he's having a problem here, particularly in a state like Michigan. Let's get into this.
Back to our breaking news this morning. Sources just telling CNN a hostage deal announcement between Israel and Hamas could come as soon as today. It is unclear if that announcement happens, when the hostages would be released. But our reporting is that it would call for the release of 50 women and children being held by Hamas in exchange for a 4 to 5 day pause in fighting. This all comes as the White House is reacting to recent polling that shows President Biden losing support over his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Listen to this from White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday.
But what I'll be very clear about is we're not going to govern by polls here. We're going to, or poll numbers. We're not going to change the minds of Americans. I get that. Americans are going to feel how they feel.
In terms of those feelings, the polls show a broad lack of support among several groups, but it's especially pronounced, as you can see, among young voters. This NBC News poll shows 70% of voters ages 18 to 34 disapprove of Biden's handling of the war. Joining us now, CNN Chief.
And we're not going to show this whole clip. I just wanted to show you this piece right here because I want to point something out. Between the ages of 18 to 34%, 70% disapprove of how Joe Biden is handling this war. And I also told you that RFK Jr. actually is gaining support. I think he has more support from that age group than Joe Biden does. And it makes you wonder, like, where are they going to? Now, what's weird is that RFK Jr.'s position on this conflict with Israel and Gaza is in agreement with Joe Biden. He agrees with sending the weapons to Israel. He agrees in not calling for a ceasefire. So what's really strange is that it's interesting that that demographic in particular is a plus for RFK Jr., considering he has the same principle about this as Joe Biden does. So what that tells me is that people are just not aware of his position on this issue because he hasn't been on as many shows to discuss Israel and Gaza. That's part of it. And then number two, people, again, are not paying attention to who RFK Jr. actually is, and they're just paying attention to the Kennedy name. And you'll see this as well when we come into this clip here from Meet the Press, when they talk about handling of Israel-Hamas war, you'll see what I mean.
Overall, this is the handling of the Israel-Hamas war. And again, it kind of measures overall up with Biden's foreign policy approval. But look at this. Among the oldest group of voters, 65 plus, there's a majority who approve of how Biden is handling this. That's plus 12. Look at the youngest group of voters. 20 approve, 70% disapprove. He is 50 points underwater with the youngest group of voters. That is a 62-point net swing between youngest and oldest on this topic of Israel and Hamas.
And let me pause there. So you guys see what I was referring to? So this right here is a big problem for Joe Biden, that 18 to 34 demographic. We do have to remember that young voters did show up in Georgia to support Joe Biden. They did help Joe Biden. I don't think Joe Biden will win Georgia again unless some type of a miracle were to happen. So for people just to discount those young voters, I do want to remind people about what happened in Georgia for 2020. But again, it is apparent to me that some of those voters from that age group are moving over towards an RFK Jr. But again, that tells me they're not fully aware of his position on this issue either. So there's a lot to be said there, but there's more that we really need to dig into because, like I said, I don't think everyone is paying attention to what RFK Jr. is saying. I think they're just fascinated by the Kennedy name. Now, some people are paying attention and they do support him, but I don't think everybody is paying attention to what's being said. All right. If you have not had a chance to do so, smash that like button. That helps me out with the algo. Thank you very much. Kudos. Let's see if we can get the likes up to, I don't even know what it is now because I can't see it, but let's see if we can get the likes up. Thank you for the super chat, Joan. Reparations is the only justice thing to do to allow us as a country, community to progress as a society that benefits us all. I hear you, Joan. And thank you, Jay. We're not going to change the minds of Americans. The most accurate statement to come from the Biden White House ever. I hear you. Well, we are now moving on to the Jill Stein interview. So believe it or not, CNN did interview Jill Stein. So this goes back to what I said before about people making the assumption that the third party and independent candidates this time around would be ignored like they usually are by mainstream media. This time around, that is not the case. That is not the case because someone like Jill Stein, this is not her first time running for president. When she ran for president in 2012 and 2016, many didn't know who she was, but she actually became more popular after her 2016 run when mainstream media pundits blamed her for the reason that Hillary Clinton lost instead of blaming Hillary Clinton. Imagine that. So this time around, people know who Jill Stein is coming into the race. So she was on CNN, and I want you to see the difference between the way this commentator talks to someone on the left and the way that Abby Phillips did earlier in the segment with Nina Turner. Here we go.
My next guest has launched an unexpected bid for the White House. Two-time Green Party presidential nominee Jill Stein is seeking the party's nomination in 2024, calling the current political system broken. She joins me for tonight's candidate interview. Jill Stein, thank you so much for being here this evening. We've got a lot to discuss tonight. I'm eager to get your opinion on so many things, but I do want to get your reaction to this Colorado 14th Amendment ruling. The judge saying that Donald Trump, quote, engaged in an insurrection, but will stay on the Colorado ballot. Do you agree with that?
You know, I am not a legal expert, and especially not in this area. This is the third case, as I understand it, to be decided in favor of allowing the voters basically to either accept or reject Donald Trump on the ballot. That sounds reasonable to me. I tend to err on the side of allowing voters to make decisions. But again, you know, this is not my area of expertise at all.
Well, on that point, that was one of the big arguments that was raised. The question essentially came down to whose decision should it be, and should one's behavior foreclose that moment? So we'll see what happens, maybe other places. But now to your bid for the White House, because you've done this twice before, once in 2012, also 2016. You never cracked 2 million votes. You didn't receive a single electoral vote. Why do you think the third time will end up differently?
Well, I think you can ask the voters why it is that they are clamoring for more choices. You know, when you don't have exposure, when you're not covered by the media, when there are all sorts of hoops, expensive hoops that you have to jump through as a grassroots campaign in order to even get on the ballot. There are all kinds of reasons why independents and third parties have a very steep uphill climb. But, you know, the voters are clamoring for more choices. And I would say, you know, who is anybody to tell the voters that they don't deserve choices? This is really fundamental to our democracy, to our rights as voters, and to the integrity of our elections, is to have those choices.
Yeah. And I would say the people that would say that the voters do not have choices or should not have a choice is mainstream media. They're the ones that say that. The pundits on CNN, on MSNBC, and on Fox News, they're the ones that will tell you, look, you either vote for Joe Biden or you get Donald Trump, okay? Like, that's just how it is. So you guys got to make a decision here. Do you want Trump again? Do you want Donald Trump? Is that what you want? I'm not sure the fear mongering will work this time around.
You know, there has been a lot of criticism about a two-party system for that very reason, frankly, and that when somebody who is not a part of either the Democrats or the Republican Party, they get a lot of criticism. They're accused of being a spoiler vote. In fact, you yourself was accused of that as well, accused of having taken away votes from Hillary Clinton in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, where Trump's victory margin was smaller than your total votes.
Pause here for a second. 2016 presidential election. So in Michigan, you'll see the Trump-Clinton margin was 10,704. Jill Stein had 51,463 votes. The fact that Jill got that many votes as a third-party candidate, that's impressive. Wisconsin, Trump-Clinton margin 22,748. Jill, 31,072. And then we'll see Pennsylvania, Trump Clinton margin, 44,292. Jill Stein, 49,900. And I think that's 141 there at the end. What's interesting is, once again, Michigan is at play. Joe Biden does need Michigan to win. And he's not doing well there now. Particularly, remember that Michigan has the largest Arab community in the United States, and he's not polling well among the Arab community. So he does need Michigan to win. So if he does not win Michigan, that's it for Joe. But that being said, I would argue that those voters in those states that came out to vote for Jill Stein did not want Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump as president. And that's why they voted for the third party choice. That's typically how it works. They saw both of them as horrible.
When you hear this complaint, based on what you've just said about who has the nerve essentially to tell the American voters who they can and cannot have as choices, do you think the criticism has been fair about your entrance into the races?
I think the criticism reflects a certain kind of arrogance that the establishment parties own your vote. They don't own your vote. They have to earn your vote. And, you know, the studies and the statistics are very clear that people who voted Green, almost 2/3 would not have come out to vote at all had there not been a Green or someone with a Green agenda been on the ballot. So it's completely invalid to suggest that those votes belonged to Hillary Clinton. And I think it reflects a kind of arrogance of the establishment parties to presume that voters owe them their votes. And I think that's part of what people are rebelling against now in clamoring for other choices. It's a record high 63% of voters now who are saying that the two-party system has failed them. And, to look at the reality of people's lives now, there's a lot to that, where you have over 60% living paycheck to paycheck. 1 in 4 are food insecure. You have 40% of renters who are severely economically stressed. half of young people are saying that they are hopeless about the future, and in fact that they feel betrayed and abandoned by their government on really critical issues, including the climate collapse, which is accelerating towards us right now. So I think, those are all reflections of the fact that people are really hungry for more choices and they want a real debate, which only happens when you have challengers on the ballot. Yeah. And I think, if you look at what your mother, sorry, go ahead.
So I just want to add, Jill Stein was able to get on the ballot in over 40 states in 2016. She's probably going to have that happen again because the Greens have the infrastructure to make that happen, and they've done this before. It's not like it's their first time, so that probably will happen. What I was really surprised by with this interview was that this is the first time I've seen an interview with Jill Stein on mainstream media where I felt like they weren't trying to take her down. Like, does that make sense? Like, I was kind of surprised. Number one, they brought her on CNN. But again, that goes to show you they can't ignore these independent and third party candidates this time around. The stakes are too high. Joe Biden is polling horribly. If Joe Biden was polling, if his poll numbers were through the roof, they could probably just ignore the third party independent candidates because his numbers are so low and the people that are running do have name recognition. They can't ignore it. So Joe Biden should stop ignoring it as well.
Okay, I was going to ask you, but one of the things you did leave out, which is going to be very top of mind for many voters right now, in addition to everything you just listed, has been the Israel-Hamas war. And a lot of voters right now, particularly leaning in, and you have been an outspoken critic of Israel's ground operation in Gaza. One need only comb through your X account to see that you have been very condemning of the administration and the American response, and also what's going on in Israel. Do you condemn the actions as well of Hamas on October 7th?
I condemn all violence against civilians. Yes, absolutely. At the same time, I think one has to recognize that what we're seeing from the Netanyahu regime now is in a league of its own, and it's really it's horrific to witness. You have over 2 million people who are denied food and water and electricity, who are being bombed relentlessly for the past month. Half of the housing has been destroyed in Gaza. People have had to move, to just pack up and walk to safety, and they're being bombed as they do. You're seeing the targeting of hospitals and healthcare centers and refugee centers and press offices, as well as the press themselves. I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. And we are seeing, Israel now kind of being considered a pariah state. So it's not just that this is terrible for Palestinians, this is also terrible for Israel. And we're seeing countries who have repaired their relations with Israel, including Jordan, one of the few Arab countries who've reestablished relations, who've now basically broken them off and recalled their ambassadors.
I mean, and this is.
So Jill is really good on this issue. I can tell you, Jill did speak at a couple of anti-war rallies this year. She spoke at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. She also spoke at the Answer Coalition Peace in Ukraine rally, which was actually a couple weeks after the Rage Against the War Machine rally. So this is kind of like her wheelhouse. She's really good on this particular issue. So it's just, again, I'm just still shocked that CNN actually brought Jill Stein on for an interview. I think we all remember how they tried to ignore her in 2016.
This is part of Israel take. Go ahead.
Part of the reason I'd love to have you back on and talk about what you would do, since you're asking to be the president of the United States, what you would do differently to try to stop what is happening. Dr. Jill Stein, we'll have to have that conversation another day. Thank you so much.
So I wanted you to hear that part too, because it appears they want to bring her back on. So guys, the tide is turning. And I want to remind you of something that Jill Stein went through, because she is one of the ones that did try to fight to have her voice heard. And she was arrested. And I don't know if everybody remembers this, but Democracy Now! Captured this. This was actually 11 years ago. It said Green Party's Jill Stein and Sherry Hunkala arrested attempting to enter Hofstra debate. So this is when they wouldn't let her debate.
Slide over here. Just slide over is all we need to do. Come on over for a minute. You can stand here. Just slide over. Slide over here. Slide over here. Come on, please.
Well, we're here to stand our ground. We're here to stand ground for the American people who have been systematically locked out of these debates for decades by the Commission on Presidential Debates. We think that this commission is entirely illegitimate, that if democracy truly prevailed, there would be no such commission, that the debates would still be run by the League of Women Voters, that the debates would be open with the criteria that the League of Women Voters had always used, which was...
Can I just ask a question really quick? I have to find this out from someone. I wonder what happened to the League of Women Voters. What happened to that organization? Because that's what Jill Stein was saying there. If they were still managing the debates, this wouldn't be happening. So I want to find that out. I think I'm going to do a little bit of digging to find out what happened to them.
That if you have done the work to get on the ballot, if you are on the ballot and could actually win the Electoral College by being on the ballot in enough states, that you deserve to be in the election and you deserve to be heard, and that the American people actually deserve to hear choices which are not bought and paid for by multinational corporations and Wall Street.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are obstructing the vehicle of pedestrians and traffic. If you refuse to move, you are subject to arrest. Remove them, bring them back to the rest.
Come on, step up, please. Stand up.
We'll help you.
Come on. Thank you, man.
Thank you, ladies.
Watch the flag, please.
Thank you, ladies. Who spotted us? Thank you. Come with us. Just come with us. Thank you, man.
Okay, you guys got to stay here. All right, everybody, we're going to ask you to please.
Yeah, so that was when Jill Stein was arrested for just trying to debate. That was just absolutely ridiculous. But I want to take you back to a time where she also explained why it's important for third parties to get that 5%. So shout out to Neoliberal Tears here, who's been doing the damn thing on Twitter. Similar to Case Study QB, Neoliberal Tears has been clipping a lot of things, some old, some new. Says Dr. Stein on the tangible benefits of third parties getting 5% of the vote. Everyone listen to this. This is important.
If we hit 5%, that is a breakthrough, because at 5%, we become a nationally recognized party. We immediately have $10 million out of the starting gate in the next presidential election, and it means we have automatic ballot access on most states. So that means that Americans actually are guaranteed that you have a choice. So make your vote count. You know, don't throw your vote away on more of a political system that has thrown you under the bus. You can actually invest your vote in this race in a real movement for change. And that.
Let's pause here. Everybody heard what she said? If you get that 5% as a third party, then you get the federal funding. If you get 15%, then you're on the debate stage, right? That's why I told you, I said RFK Jr., if he keeps up those numbers, he's going to be on the debate stage. One of the things they show you here at this point in time, Trump was at 41%. Hillary Clinton was at 33%. This is among independents. Gary Johnson was at 11% and Jill Stein was at 3%. Gary Johnson, by the way, was a historic race for the Libertarian Party. A lot of people, I'm surprised more people don't cover this, but I talked about this before, that Gary Johnson, that race in particular, was historical for the Libertarian Party. The amount of support that he was able to get. And remember, they're on like all 50 states, the Libertarian Party is, right?
Is transformative. Coming out of this race, we're going to be focusing on two things in particular that have really bothered the American people. Number one is that Americans deserve to know who they can vote for. We need a debate commission that's not controlled by the Democratic and Republican parties. So we're going to be creating a campaign to throw out this biased two-party commission on presidential debates that silences political opposition at a time that the American people are hungering for it. We're going to create a real People's Commission for the presidential debate.
Well, you say a lot of the polls undercount millennials and different groups, but also, you know, the support for independent candidates, and I'm independent politically myself, but the support for independent candidates tends to shrink closer and closer to the election. There is still this idea that you're wasting your vote by voting for another party. I don't know what the answer is to that, but it's very prevalent.
Well, and let me say there is specifically an answer. It's called ranked choice voting. And what it does is it lets you go into the voting booth and rank your choices. So you can vote for an independent or a third-party candidate, knowing that if that candidate loses, your vote is automatically reassigned to your second choice. So then there's no fear voting. There's no voting based on some calculation that you don't want your vote thrown away. This guarantees that you can bring your values into our vote, which is what Americans are desperate for. Because just, an election that's dictated by who do you hate the most and who do you fear the most, that's not a democracy. Democracy needs a moral compass. It needs our values. We've got to be able to bring our values to the voting system.
Shout out to Neoliberal Tears for that clip, just as a reminder for you guys. But one thing she mentioned was ranked choice voting. And I do just want to bring this up for probably the millionth time on this show. Ranked choice voting would be a game changer because, like she said, this idea of throwing your vote away wouldn't even be a talking point if every state had ranked choice voting, because then it would just get deferred to your second choice. So Maine has ranked choice voting. And if I remember correctly, I believe there's one district in Nebraska that has ranked choice voting. Nevada, actually, I believe just got ranked choice voting this year, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe this will spread across the country. Hopefully it can. I know it didn't pass in Massachusetts, and I think that's because the way that it was worded. But ranked choice voting would be a game changer. But wait for it, folks. If you notice, mainstream media is not avoiding these third party and independent candidates anymore. Going to go to some of the super chats here. Willis, thank you for staying on Oh, I said that already. Sorry. Sorry about that. Did I say Janice? Yeah. Thank you, Janice. Honestly, with all the policies intended to keep Black communities in poverty, should some form of reparations there should be some form of reparations for that as well, not as much money. Thank you, Darnell. Don't vote for any third party candidate that takes money from corporate lobbies. Emoji says Jill mentioned that she's getting more press attention than she ever did before. You guys see? Marco, Jill got arrested at the debates and at the Dakota Access Pipeline. Thank you, Stop Sniffing Kids Joe. Biden is cheating with I'll leave that there. I can't say that on here. You know how YouTube is. But thank you so much for that. Shout out to Colin Palmquist for becoming a Sabby member. Let's give Colin a big whoop, whoop. Whoop, whoop. Marco says the Commission for Presidential Debates funded by two parties replaced the League of Women Voters in 1987. Okay. I might need to do a show about that. I need to go back. I need to read up on this, go back through some of the history of the League of Women Voters. That's interesting. Mary says the League of Women Voters is still active. Each state has a chapter. It's run by old ladies now. Nothing new with them. Interesting. And thank you, Thought Process. That 5% is why I voted for Jill in 2020 and why Cornel West leaving the Greens was terribly short-sighted. Thanks, Peter. All right, we're going to our final story, which is Cardi B. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it has happened. Cardi B has decided to drop Joe Biden. Cardi says she's not having it. She was very vocal about it. We're going to start with this article, and then we're going to go to a couple of clips here. Cardi B turns on Joe. Uh-oh, Joe. You done messed up now. You have messed up. Rapper Cardi B has turned on President Joe Biden after it was announced that there will be a 5% budget cut to public services in her native New York City. The WAP hitmaker, they say that as if that's the only hit that she's had. It's just funny. The WAP hitmaker, who participated in Biden campaign promotion when he was a presidential candidate, took aim at the Democrat in a 10-minute live session on Instagram and vowed that she would never endorse another aspiring president. Bronx-raised Cardi B, whose real name is Bakalis Amanzar, posted the video following last week's announcement by New York City Mayor Eric Adams that there would be a 5% cut affecting several services in the Big Apple. The police, public libraries, schools, and sanitation are among the departments affected. I'm gonna keep it real. I don't think you should defund the sanitation department in New York City. Okay. Too many trash bags on the street when it's time to come pick up the trash on trash day. Too many little hairy friends running around in the streets. I used to live in New York. I know. I don't think any cuts should be made on sanitation. Okay. All right. And then it goes into what she says there. We're actually just going to go straight to the video, but I do want to go to this point here at the bottom of the article where it says, similarly, Cardi B had shown her support for Senator Bernie Sanders, who she interviewed twice previously. And we're going to start there. We're going to start with how we got here. How did she end up endorsing Joe Biden in the first place? I want to take you back to when Cardi B endorsed and supported Bernie Sanders. Remember, she did interview him. One of the things that I will say about Cardi B is that even though she is rich and famous now, she hasn't forgotten where she's come from. So one of the things that she mentioned to Bernie Sanders was her experience growing up in poverty, dealing with low wages, etc., during his 2020 presidential campaign. Let's start there, and then we'll get into why she's mad at Joe.
What are we going to do about wages in America?
Good.
Like, for example, like me as a New Yorker, not now, but, you know, when I was not famous, I just felt like no matter how many jobs I get, I wasn't able to make ends meet. Like, I wasn't able to pay my rent, get transportation, and eat.
That is an excellent and important question, because right now we have tens of millions of people who are earning what I consider to be starvation wages. Can you imagine somebody today earning $9 an hour?
So again, just to remind you how things were back then, this was an in-person interview that Cardi B had with Bernie Sanders. And this is the portion where they're discussing wages.
It don't make no sense.
No, it doesn't. How do you pay your rent? How do you pay for food? How do you pay for transportation?
Right.
You can't. And if you have a child.
Yes. And my thing is that, you know, certain people like to brag that there is more jobs now in America, but it's like, yeah, there's an increase of jobs given, but what are they paying in these jobs? They're practically paying nothing.
Okay. We're not going to play the whole thing there because I don't want to get copyright, but you get the point that they discussed there. So what happened? How did she get to the point where she decided to endorse Joe Biden? Well, I want to take you back again. You have to remember when Bernie Sanders decided to suspend his campaign, he told everybody, guys, we gotta support Joe. Just like he said in reference to Hillary Clinton, we gotta back Miss Hillary Clinton. He told people to do that. Cardi B was one of the ones that decided to go along and endorse Joe Biden. I'll take you back to that conversation here.
Excited too that you're endorsing Joe Biden, and I will want you to tell my platform, why are you endorsing him? Like, why should we vote for him?
Well,
and
a
how
couple of
can we
reasons,
spread for us to vote for Joe Biden?
Okay. First point is that when I announced that I was running for president, and there were like 18 people running, you know, what I said is, if I don't win, and I tried hard to win, I will endorse the Democrat who wins, because Donald Trump is, to my mind, the most dangerous president in the modern history of America. This is a guy who lies all the time. He doesn't believe in science. He downplayed this whole coronavirus, which has led to the deaths of many thousands of people unnecessarily. He doesn't believe in the Constitution. He thinks he's above the law. So this is a bad news guy that has got to be defeated. And I will do everything that I can to defeat him. What I am also trying to do right now, Cardi, is to work with Joe to see that he becomes a more progressive candidate.
How'd that work out? So this is when they both decided to endorse Joe Biden. Bernie said he would work with him to make him more progressive. I told you guys that they would not be able to push Joe left, You know, you can't, how are you going to push someone left who they co-wrote the crime bill? They were hanging out with racists. Okay. How are you going to push this person left? Didn't want to support any type of universal health care for people in this country. He made that very clear that he would veto it if it came across the board. Still in the deep pockets of corporations and the military industrial complex in this country. And you're going to push that person left like that overnight? I didn't think so. And it didn't happen.
In other words, what I want to see him stand for, which he will, is to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, to make sure that all of our young people have the opportunity to go to college regardless of their income, all right? To cancel student debt for a lot of people. I would go further in all of these areas than he goes, but he is moving in the right direction. He's moving in the right direction on immigration reform. I think you will be pleased to hear what he has to say. I know that criminal justice and the number of people who are in jail today, often African-American or Latino, disproportionately, is an issue of concern to you. I think you'll be hearing him making some pretty strong statements about the need for criminal justice reform to make sure that we're not throwing young people into jail, but getting them the education and the jobs that they need.
Yeah. So those things didn't happen. And now Cardi B is voicing her opinion. She is very angry. She has every right to be, not just over those things that I mentioned, but also she's frustrated about Joe Biden's decisions in reference to sending funding to Ukraine and sending funding to Israel in reference to this war, and just sending money to Israel every year anyway. So my whole thing is about this is this, for the people who continue to tell me, well, Americans don't care about foreign policy. Well, they will when they see that how much money our government is spending and not giving the American people or putting towards fixing things in this country. And that is essentially what is happening. Cardi B has some things to say. She went off. Here we go.
Angry bitch right now. I'm an angry ass bitch right now. I'm an angry bitch. Y'all need to get in here because I'm about to go off right now. Right now. Yeah, I'm about to go off right now. Come on in. Hold up. Oh, y'all outside because usually I be having like 30,000 people by now, but I have 24,000. I need y'all to spread this fucking video. I need y'all to spread this video. And if something happens to me, it's because I'm speaking truth. So God forbid something happens to me or my family or some shit, is because the niggas is after me because I'm speaking the truth. And here's the truth, right? In New York, there is a 120 million budget cut. There's a 120 million budget cut in New York that is going to affect schools, public libraries, and the police department. Y'all know I don't give a fuck about the cops, but like it is what it is. There's going to be an $120 million budget cut with schools, with libraries, and the cops, and the police department. And a $5 million budget cut in sanitation. Of a budget cut in sanitation. Bitch, we're going to be drowning with rats.
Let me pause there for just a second. I don't frown upon the budget cut to the police. I do take issue with the budget cut to education, obviously sanitation as well. And so she has beef with Eric Adams as well, not just Joe Biden. But the thing is, our country has been shown multiple times before. We have a lot of money that's basically being held in a budget for the Department of Defense. And we have billions of dollars. When another country that's a supposed ally needs that money, we have no problem kicking that money out, even if it's overnight. But when it comes to the problems that we have in this country, all of a sudden there's no money. Instead of pouring more money into the school systems in New York, they're taking money out. They're removing money from the school system. It doesn't make any sense.
We're going to be drowning in fucking rats. So we are going to be having a budget cut on these shits. Mind you, and this is why I said I'm not
That's what I'm telling y'all. I'm not this year. Don't fucking ask me. I don't give a fuck the resume that they send. I don't give a fuck. I'm not endorsing no fucking presidents no more. Cause how is there a $100 million budget cut in New York City for fucking schools, library, police safety, and sanitation? Yeah, Joe Biden's talking about, like, yeah, we could fund 2 wars. We could fund 2 wars. Motherfuckers talking about we don't got it, but we got it. Like, we're the greatest nation. No, the fuck we're not. We're going through some shit right now. Like, say it. Say it. We're really going through, we really are fucked right now.
I think what's interesting is that the Democratic Party continues to put on the smile and as if they're trying to trick the voters and tell us that everything's great and Joe Biden's doing a great job when people can obviously see the reality, right? So the thing is, I think what she's hinting towards, and it's funny, like someone was like, why didn't she get dressed for this video? So it's really funny. But I think part of the problem is that people would be, I think, a little bit understanding if you were just telling people the truth. I think when you try to sugarcoat it and make it seem like things are on the up and up when we know the reality is not that way, that just makes people more angry at you. Like, we would still be pissed. Don't get me wrong. We would still be upset with you, Joe. We would still be angry with you, Joe. Don't get me wrong about that. But it's the lies. It's the constant lies. Joe Biden's doing such a great job. We just need to change the message. We're not saying the message enough. We just have to keep telling people, and then they'll realize that everything's great economically, even though we know when we look at our bank accounts, it's not. Let's continue.
$120 million. Like, where these kids are gonna go? Like, I'm lucky, I'm blessed, I'm whatever the fuck. But like, what's gonna happen to my nieces? What's gonna happen to my nephews? What's gonna happen to my cousins, my aunts, my friends? That's living in the hood. Fuck the hood, like my shit. Like, I don't give a fuck if I live in Jersey, bitch. I'm from the Bronx. I don't want to see my shit affected. The Bronx, Brooklyn, it's gonna affect the whole New York. 120 million budget cut on schools, libraries, police department, and sanitation. Bitch, New York is already fucking super dirty. Like, yo, you know what's embarrassing? Like, it's like, you know, like, I know people from California, I know people from Atlanta, so I always be like, yeah, New York is the greatest place in the world. Yeah, they be like, New York is dirty. And it is dirty. And we're gonna get even dirtier with the fucking budget cut. And yeah, we talking about we could fund 2 wars. That's like a nigga trying to front like, yeah, I got the money to support 2 bitches, but you really don't. Y'all talk about y'all don't make negotiation with the odds. Well, y'all need to sit the fuck down with these people and find agreement. No, we cannot fund these fucking wars. We can't. Keep it a bean. We can't. Like, y'all doing budget cuts on the biggest city in the United States. Somebody said, Cardi, look behind. Stop playing with me. This shit is getting out of hand. We're really going, they don't want to say the word, but we're going through a recession right now. We really fucking are. And Major Eric said it. There is a budget cut going on in New York. And little by little, it's going to go in your states. Okay? This is fucking crazy. And then, so, like, you know what? I told myself this week, like, yo, the internet right now is too dark because celebrity drama, of course, we love it. We infuse with it. We watch it. But it's like, yo, that's little of what's really going on in the world right now. That's nothing compared to what's going on in the world right now. The world is in fucking shambles. After the pandemic, a lot of these countries, they want to do shit because everybody.
Yeah, and then it stops there. But the point that she's trying to make is that we have all this money to fund these wars, but all of a sudden you don't have money to feed the poor. right? So isn't that how like Tupac explained it? So her thing is like, look, I'm not endorsing any more presidential candidates anymore. Maybe that's for the best, Cardi. And maybe that is for the best. We are going to do call in tonight. I'm sure there's lots to discuss before I break, because I will be going on break Friday. I'll be live Thursday evening. I'll be live Thanksgiving night, but I am going on break Friday, and I'll be back that following Tuesday. But we are going to do call in tonight, so get ready for that. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back, and then we'll go on over to call in.
All right. So this is where we give Sabrina a little break. She's talking about a big break coming up. That's when she's not going to do shows on, Friday and Sunday coming up. She is doing a Thanksgiving show. But this is where we give her a little break before we jump into call-in. Sorry, I'm playing with a tab here that's still playing. Stop. Okay. And let's check out the call-in. So we are doing call-in tonight. That's why we do a little break. As you might be able to tell, I'm in a different, I don't know, we call it an undisclosed location. It's just a different room, so I guess I disclosed it. But let's look at that. Where's my mouse? Here we go. At our call-in room. So we're going to have, call in a bit. You can do it on your computer. You can do it on your phone. Sabby will be posting the call-in link in the chat. She usually posts it as a pin chat soon. But yeah, tonight RFK, Black Voters, Cardi B, and more. And as always, in call-in, we want to hear from you, and you can talk about anything you want, or you can go off these topics, whatever you feel like. Now let me pull that. Make that. All right, let's see. We got a few chats stacked up here. Let's check those out. Thanks for the super chat, 007 Angelo. I thought Cardi B came from the streets, LOL. Yeah, thanks for that one. And we got this one from Jason. Would you support free college or trade school for anyone that is a descendant of slavery for 2 or 3 generations? You're wrong about Bobby. He is honest. Now, Kennedy, the name helps. Listen to Rogan, cannot fake it. All right. Thanks for that one, Jason. And we talk about reparations around here a lot. So, and we also talk about it in call-in. So, it's certainly a topic we can continue to discuss. Let's see. Thanks for the super chat from Stop Sniffing Kids Joe. All the elections in the USA are free and fair. LOL. Yep. And from the Oracle at Delphi. Oh, yeah, she said Bernie needs to put on Cardi's wig so his comedy routine will have more punch. Yep. I thought that was pretty good from Noelle, and we usually hear from her in the call-in. And thanks for this one, super chat, Dr. Nick Rivera. What's up with this administration and brown babies? Locks up Latino ones and allows Palestinian ones to be. And then we know that little symbol means, dropping them bombs. There's, there is a difference depending. There's that concept. I think Chomsky and others have talked about it, about worthy and unworthy victims. And, you really see that in like a Ukraine versus a Palestine, in that, some are viewed worthy and some are viewed as unworthy. And the skin color can definitely play into that as well. And thanks for this super chat as well. Stop Sniffing Kids Show. Politicians use wars to launder money. Yeah, I think that's a really based comment. We always have to remember that it's when you get down to these things, it is all about the money. In any war, any war tensions that you look at, it's always it traces back to the money. There is like, if you look at the stock, I found a story the other day. I should have had it queued up, but it was about how the stock prices of these stocks that track the defense companies are up, and it's it makes money. War tensions make money because you get more contracts, and the wars themselves, of course, make money. And you see how much of this is about all these weapons getting made and sent over. And that's really at the core of this. I mean, we have this whole system that has at its core this problem that you have this very small group of billionaires, and they're using their huge corporations. They have vast resources, vast wealth, vast money, vast amounts of money, and they use that to infiltrate, to control, to influence the system, the political system, and media. Of course, they bought the media and the whole in the whole thing. And so if we're talking about what to do about all this, you really have to trace all these things back to that core problem. It's the money and the corruption. And if you're not seeing that and tracing back to that, then how are you ever going to get to real solutions? And I think there is a lot of this frustration out there because people see all these problems and they don't see a way out. And I would, my thesis about all this, and I kind of put it in these in abbreviation MCDS: money, corruption, demands, solutions. So you have to recognize that it's all about the money, that it comes to the money, and so in the corruption. And so you have to recognize that, and you have to be ready to fix it. And fixing it gets into demanding change, demanding something different. And when you get to that part, then you say, okay, we're demanding to get the money out to fix this corrupt election system. So then what? We're to the D part, then what's the S part? The solutions, right? And then you get into, well, you have to have things like real campaign finance reform, public financing. You have to get into real with teeth regulations of the way elections are funded and influenced, the PACs, the super PACs. And then you run into the issue that the Supreme Court's going to knock that down, because right now the Supreme Court sees money as speech. So then you get into the solution. Well, then you have to fix that. And you have to fix that with a move to amend style constitutional amendment. So there's your MCDS. And, the last thing I'll say is I'm looking to collaborate. I'm wondering how people feel about how can we get a movement around that, and in that corruption movement around recognizing these things and fixing them.
Yep. That's something we can discuss tonight on Call-In as well.
There you go. All right. We'll be kicking over to Colin. We'll see you in there.
All right. Heading on over to Call-In. This is episode 136. RFK, Black voters, Cardi B, and more. Let's chat. I think I put let's chat. I was busy today. Let's chat. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. Let me make sure that's there. Yeah, the Call-In link is pinned to the top of the chat, guys. So we will head on over to Call-In. So you know how we do this? Don't forget, I will be live Thursday night. I know it's Thanksgiving, but we eat earlier up in this piece. So we'll be eating Thanksgiving dinner earlier. I'll see you then around 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let's head on over to Call-In. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.